So I believe right now that we're actually live. So this is the second live stream that I've done. I'm still a bit of a boomer when it comes to this stuff, so I'm hoping that the audio is coming out of both sides. I've had to try to set this up. So earlier I accidentally went live, so there were about a minute of a video of me trying to set this up earlier on. But we are live now. If you can see this, you can hear it. Let me know in the comments so that I know I'm on the right track. I know that you can hear it out of both speakers, because that's the thing that's been an absolute pain for me, is trying to get it to come out of both speakers. Is it loud enough? Does it sound all right? And if it does, and I get confirmation in the comments, we'll just get rolling. So let's have a look through some of the comments. So we'll start with a couple of ones. Hey up, James, how's it going? James, let me know if it sounds all right. If it's coming out of both speakers, you better tell me if it does. So it says, Sandro's asking me, hey Peter, any plans to come to Portugal one day? Do you know, I've been to Portugal. I went over to Portugal and spent some time with a guy called David Sena over there. David Sena is one of the most incredible people that I've ever met in my life. We actually created Isabella's Star 1 together. The method for that, we backwards and forwards, we jammed, we did a load of different bits. And it was the first time that I ever actually had enough money to be able to travel abroad on my own. So what happened was, I ended up going over there, and I'm going to raise the volume a little bit, just give me a bit more of that. Yeah, I ended up going over there. I went to Lisbon. And then I think I've been over there a couple of times in between. Might be wrong. I can't remember. I think I've been to Faro, and I've been back to Lisbon. But David went off and he became an IT engineer, really smart guy. And when I'm talking about like dealing with algorithms and other things, this guy just knew more than anybody else I've ever met. In fact, I've only ever met one person that was similar in that sense, and that was Atlas Brookings. So to answer your question, someday I'd love to come over to Portugal. I don't know what the scene's like over there, but I'd love to revisit it on fresh eyes. So let me just look through these comments, answer a few questions. Oh, here we go. Sounds great. Looks good. Sounds good. That's perfect then. There we go. So we've got greetings from Turkey. So your vanishing lecture was amazing. Thank you for that. So I've got family from Turkey. So I've got family from Istanbul. So my brother and sister, my half brother and sister, they're Turkish, and they're from Ankara. And in England, if you're ever over this side and you come over this way, there's a couple of restaurants called Ephesus in West Yorkshire, and they're my family's restaurants over there. So there we go. Let's have a little look through these comments. So it says, for multiple out envelopes, is it a good idea to take a blank billet from the envelope and write one of the outs first, just so they see you write before you start the routine as a convincer? Now, what's really interesting is... What's really interesting with that is when you're dealing with multiple outs, it depends where those multiple outs are coming from. If the multiple outs are coming out the exact same place, and I'm trying to speak in code here just in case there's anybody on this live that shouldn't be here, but hopefully you understand. If you're dealing with the lives coming from the same place, I always feel it's beneficial to write something earlier on with a time delay in between it, then it goes inside it, and then you revisit it later. Whereas if the multiple outs coming out later in the show from different places, then one thing that you might do is you might just mention, you know, later on I'm going to get to something, and I predicted, I feel in advance what's about to happen before it happens, or whatever your script there is. Now, there's a lot of different scripts that you can put in place when it comes to multiple outs, because you're either looking at predictions, or you're looking at influence, or you're looking at being able to see in the future, or you're looking at having a dream and then living out that dream in real life, or you're looking at deja vu. And I think that there's something that's really interesting in that concept, but you've got to be really mindful when it comes to using predictions. And this is one thing that I talk about quite a lot whenever I'm consulting, and that's whenever you put a prediction into a show, it almost cannibalizes the mind reading during that show. And let me explain what I mean. Let's say you've got a big confabulation box at the end, and out of it comes a prediction, a master prediction of things that have happened during that show. If you've managed to predict all that stuff, all that random information there's no way that you could know, well then theatrically the mind reading that exists in between is an absolute waste of time when you think about it, because why would you not been able to predict that? So you've almost got to put in place some line that suggests that you can't see everything, or that some things are slightly out of place. And I think it's really nice to sort of get numbers backwards. And let's say, for example, you pointed to somebody and you realized that they were left-handed, and you said to them, if you were just to name a random number for me, and they said 86, I think it's interesting when it comes to it later on that it's 68, but you assume that they were going to be right brains, so that, you know, you're almost putting a discrepancy in the prediction. So not everything's too perfect. And I try to do this quite a lot. I don't want to go off onto too much of a tangent, but if you watch my previous videos that have gone out, for example, if you watch the Burglass effect video, and that is in my set of videos, it's very difficult to put any sort of conflict in the burglass effect. It goes from start to finish. It's a trick. Most tricks go from start to finish. And you look at the hero's journey, and the hero's journey, let's take again, I've talked about this, Harry Potter or Rocky. What you have is we get introduced to a character, they get introduced into a new world, and then there's a conflict, and then there's a resolution. And if you look at the Burglass Effect documentary that I made, it starts out talking about David Burglass and feeling like there were an imposter syndrome, and that's 100% true. Then it gets to the bit where I talk about traveling, and then I perform the Burglass Effect, and you see this version of, it's a clean version of the Burglass Effect. I wouldn't say it's perfect because there's compromises in everything that you do, but then you see this clean version of the Burglass Effect, and then it comes back, and I say, but it never really felt like it truly belonged to me. And that's because I didn't create it. And that's the conflict. The conflict is that even though I've presented what I feel is this really wonderful version of the Burglass Effect, it just doesn't feel like it belongs to me. And David told me I have to go the extra mile. So for this, I went X amount of miles to make it truly original. And then you get to see my version at the end, which is the resolution, right? And that's the same with predictions. I think that sometimes, you know, you've got to make it so that there is some sort of conflict or there is some slight discrepancy, so that there's an elation when you come to your bigger predictions towards the end. So if the first few start out a little bit scatty, but the deeper you get, let's say it's a dream, you know, we start sleep light and then we end heavy. So the lighter you sleep, the more scattered the information is going to be, and the deeper that you go into that sleep, the deeper it's going to be. So really think about using your predictions. But to answer your question very quickly, yes. If it's always better if it's coming from one place to be seen to be writing it down and saying we'll come back to that later on. You've got to then decide what it is that you're purporting to do. Is it a piece of influence? Is it a piece of mind reading? Is it is it a prediction? Is it deja vu? They're the really important elements of that question when you're using those multiple outs. So I hope that that sort of helps. Let's have a little look across here. So Magic MC just got the Grail yesterday. Thanks for putting this together. Do you know what? It was one of the wildest things that I've ever shot, and there's so much stuff that didn't make it in there, and it didn't make it in there because there was just so much stuff, and it started to get longer and longer and longer. So I just chose the best stuff, and I thought that were it. I would like to hear your opinion. I never did magic for money, street magic for random people normally, but now I'm in a condition that I need it, but I don't know exactly where I should start. So Sandra, it's a great question, and that's a question that I am going to answer very briefly now, but I will do a bigger video on it later on, and that's going from turning amateur to professional. And when I say that, I only mean it in the context of the definition, because there's a lot of amateur magicians that I know that are actually better than professionals. And I've said that a few times in the past. Some of the greatest minds that I know never, ever make it into a career. They never turn it into a career. They just do what they do. So to answer your question, very briefly, is that do what you need to do. Necessity is there for a reason. If you've got a skill set you've spent years and years refining, and you know that you can entertain people, and there's venues that need entertainment, then it's surplus to requirement. So to start that, just do what I used to do. I mean, I'm not professing to be somebody that does 1,000 gigs a year, because I don't. But when I was doing gigs and I needed it to survive, I think I was charging £50 to £100, which I could never gig for now, but I was charging £50 to £100 an hour. And it sounds like a lot of money that when you hear it, £50 to £100 for an hour, but it's absolutely not. And the reason it's not is because it'd take me all week to prep for it. And once I had one show built, I'd want to make tweaks. I was never quite satisfied. This venue would want something different to this venue. And I just cold called. I literally went to the nearest bar, said, can I talk to the person that puts the entertainment on, please? So they'd find me the person. I'd show them an effect, and I'd say, would I be able to leave a business card with you, or would I be able to leave my communication or my contact number? And when I first started doing shows, in fact, I never had a business card. It wasn't until I started to get frequent shows that I took some of that money, invested into business cards, and then started handing them out. And then I found myself, when I was doing corporate events, I found myself in a really strange position last year. I was doing a corporate event at, I'd like to say Medusa or something like that in London. It were like an underground weird venue, but it were a series of stock investors. And these stock investors saw my skills, and they literally wanted me to come and do training courses for the salespeople. And no matter how much I explained to them, look, like this sort of stuff, I don't think it's really going to be beneficial for you. They're like, no, we want to learn how you speak. We want to learn how you act. We're not bothered about the mind reading stuff. Just come and present. Talk to us about influence. Talk to us about marketing. So, you know, I flew over to Germany to do that, and that were interesting. So it just breeds itself. You know, word of mouth is one of the biggest ways to promote yourself. And I'm going to do a video in the future on how I ended up in this position, being able to talk to you, because in the early days, it were almost impossible to get anybody onto just even a Zoom or a Skype to take any notice of what it is that I was saying. So I really grinded at that, and I created a lot of legends, and I spread a lot of like interesting rumors and other things. And I'll talk about all that in a video. I'm very open about it. You know, I'm very open about the fact that I knew how to market myself quite well, even though I'd never got any experience in any of that stuff. But I say that my experience as a salesman, I used to sell gas and electricity. I used to knock on doors and sell packages of gas and electricity and utilities, that it did me quite well, you know, and I'm going to impart that on you. So the answer to it is, look, if there's surplus to requirement, go and give them your skills, you know. Joanne, hello Peter, can you please check your spam filter if you got my last email again? I have an inquiry regarding a show in Sweden. Johan, yes, 100%. So, just to let you know, I did get your email. I'm not going to go into specifics. I'd love to come to Sweden. I'd love to come and watch. You and I can do great things. So, we'll talk about that. The reason that I've not reached out at the second is I was just making sure that it wasn't conflicting. I'm supposed to be doing a road trip from one side of America to the other, and I'm going to be documenting it, and I just didn't want it to conflict with that. So I was just double checking the dates, looking into that, and then I was going to get straight back to you. So I apologize if I've not got back yet, but I promise I'm going to be getting back to you. Let's have a look at this. How was Blackpool for you? So the 4 walls. If you want to check out my Blackpool video, it's called 5,000 days. And the reason it's called 5,000 days is because it were pretty much exactly 5,000 days before I got the opportunity to just go and give a talk at Blackpool. And I go behind the scenes on what it were like for me in my early days. But this year, you know, it were interesting. Normally Blackpool, and I will, again, these sorts of things I want to do behind the scenes. That's a lot more what I want to do. I want you to get to know the real me, because we never get that. When you think about your favourite artists, look at Anneman, look at Corinda, you know, look at like Burling Hull, look at Al Baker. We only know the stories that we told about them. We never really know the person that wrote the book. We never really know about them other than the tales that are told by other people, and they usually spoke after these people have passed. And I'd really hate that, to leave this, you know, and not feel like we don't know each other. So I will be getting into that. But this year was strange because Blackpool's actually a holiday for me normally, which sounds weird because it's literally the ear-roll, I'm being very polite there, of Britain. It didn't used to be. It used to be a very prominent holiday destination for holiday makers. But yeah, this year was strange because normally what I do is I go, I let my hair down, I'll meet my friends on the Wednesday or the Thursday, we'll sit, we'll go to breakfast, we'll make a habit of going out for meals, we'll have a couple of drinks, and then it gets to the evening time on the Friday. I mean, on the Thursday, there's a really interesting story I'll tell in the video about Mark Lemon and I commandeering a bar, and it's become like a rite of passage since, and I couldn't go this year because I was lecturing on the Friday. And then the Friday night, I couldn't go out and meet people in the Ruskin. I had a cup of tea, I think, and then just went to bed at about 10 o'clock. And then on the Saturday, we all went out. So there were like 40 of us just walking down the high street, and we all had a really good time. Sunday, I stayed. I did a micro consultation on Sunday for somebody. And then, yeah, I left on Monday. So it were different to every other year. But I wouldn't have changed it for the world, because it were a chance for me to get off my chest something that I've been holding for nearly 5,000 days. And again, check that video out. It's worth a watch. There's so many people in here. So let's have a look at this. Was wondering if you had any ideas on toxic force replacements, considering the new iPhone update no longer allows you to do it. So, Brendan, I do, but some of them are more practical than others. Pigcake and I released this thing called In a Pinch. And that's a very cheap download you can find over at Murphy's that has an alternative version of that. And I will say that the toxic force still works. You've just got to bury it amongst a load of other numbers. And it's just not very pleasant to look at. So you've got options like iThump and things like that. But for me, there's a very easy workaround if you're working professional environments. If you're working on the street, you don't want to be doing this. But if you're working professional environments and you can give it away afterwards, if you go to a dollar store, there's a particular brand of calculator that you can pick up, and it's about this big and about this size. It's not one of the big multi-line calculators, but it's about this big, and you go and pick one up from the dollar store. I'll try to find a picture and show it in a video later on, but what you can do is you can go and get one of those, and the toxic force will work perfectly on that calculator. And I've used them in the past, and you can give them out at the end of the show. They cost $1, they cost £1.50. I just did something with Louis Laval called Lost, where I talk about it on there, and you literally just get one of these dollar store calculators or pound shop calculators, punch the numbers in, do what you've got to do. You could keep the calculator at the end. So for big presentations, that's fun. It's a little bit weird carrying a calculator around in your pocket. What I'd suggest is learning number forces. So, you know, learn ways to force numbers, and then you'll find ways to work around forcing the numbers that you need to force. But yeah, in a pinch, you know, it's on there. So let's have a look at this. What are your top 3 justifications for using a Peak wallet or a billet in general? Okay, so JJ, this one goes out to you. It's interesting that you asked that question, because there's 3 schools of thought. And one school of thought is that you don't give any justification at all, and that's going to be one of the answers to this. The second school of thought is that you give a justification, and the third school of thought is one where it depends on the situation. Now, I know that one sounds like an intermediary answer, but I'll get into what I mean. So one justification I think is a really interesting one is to find the biggest skeptic in the room, or in the group. Let's say you're working a table, there's 6 people, and I'll say, come on, like, one of you is not going to want to bring yourself forwards, but who as a group would you consider the most skeptic? And there's always a laugh there, a little bit of banter backwards and forwards. They point to somebody. I say, I want to place a bet. I want to bet you the content of my wallet that I can guess exactly what you're thinking of. And you open it, and what you do is you show like notes in there, a £20 note, whatever you want. And you say to them, right, I want you to take this. And now I always use a business card. Business cards are always better than blank billets. Like I said earlier, I am on another video, I am making a pad where billets pull out of that look like a notepad, so that you've got these beautiful billets that peel out of a notepad, and you can use them as a notepad as well, so they don't look weird. And you'll be able to get those pads over at sleightermind.co.uk, which I will get to in a moment. But you now say to them, I want you to take this and I want you to write something down. Can we have somebody that's going to be a judge, somebody that's going to be an adjudicator? Do you want to help out? You look honest. So now I get this person. I say to them, in a moment, you're going to take hold of this. For now, the money's inside there. They're going to hold the wallet in a minute. This means 2 things. 1, you can't change your mind, and 2, I can't take the money out. Slide it into there. Do you want to hold on to that for me? There's the motion. Do you want to hold that? So now the money's there and your information's there. You can't change it, and I can't take the money away, which gives that perfect justification on the narrative or the run-up. There's conflict, and now you've handed the wallet over here. An interesting one that Reese had, Reese Goodley, and again, he's got some really good stuff on this, you know, good takes on this stuff, and it more works with like places. It's like, right, I want you to go in my wallet for me, and I want you to take out an amount of change. And this is the bit that I added to his thing. And so they take out this money, and you say, right, I want you to imagine that this money could make you travel anywhere in the world. So go in the pocket and take out the business card. So then they slide out the business card. I want you to think about where this money is going to take you. So they think about it, write it down, put the change back in the wallet, put the piece of card, or pass me the piece of card, I'll put that in the wallet, or you put it back in, you put the change back in, then that goes back in, and now you look at it. So again, it's not something I've done. That's why I'm sort of explaining it a little bit like, oh, like I'm sort of falling over myself, but it works. It's like you drop the change back in. Okay, I'll take that and put that in there. You can keep hold of this for a second, and then you're done. That's another justification. And the third one is just to not give any justification at all. Remember, people don't really know where you're going with your routines, and that one's one that I've used a lot. If I'm working and I'm working close up and I have to get from person to person to person to person, the only time that I might start to introduce a justification, and this is what I meant by the in-between, where you decide whether you're going to use it or not, is if I find that there's something that I'm using more than once. So for example, if I've used it here and then this person walks over and sees me using it here, the last thing I want them to think is, well, wait a minute, every single time it's been placed inside that wallet. So then I might introduce a justification. And the justification might be that there's a time delay, and that's another good one. So if there's a time delay between the moment it gets put in the wallet and the moment that you come back to it, it makes sense for you to have it put in there. Somebody holds on to it and you say, right, that's just for safekeeping. That means that nobody can look underneath, nobody can take it from you. It's locked in there. You keep hold of that, and we will get back to it in a moment. And then you do a few things. Now you keep that piece of information on your mind, and then you come back to it later on. So that's that. When it comes to a billet, when it comes to just introducing a billet, it depends how you're playing your character, and that's a big thing, and I'm going to do a video on character building. So the very next video that you'll see is how to build your character from the ground up. So when you're watching me, I am me, but I'm not me. And what I mean by that is I'm not who I was 10 years ago. I'm not who I was when I was starting out. I didn't really understand what it is that I was doing. I didn't understand what I was saying, whether I were claiming to be a body language expert, or whether I were claiming to use micro expressions, or whether I were claiming to be psychic. I didn't know what it is that I was doing. So the answer to that question solely is based on who your character is. Now, my character, if I find somebody that I know is really good character, a really good willed person, then what I'll say to them is, look, I'm going to have you write this down for a couple of reasons. One, it means that if I get this wrong, you can show everybody that I've got it wrong. But two, because you're such a good-natured person, chances are people are going to think that you've just agreed with me to make me look good, because they can't see what's inside your head. So I want you to write it down for me, and then I want you to show everybody else, and then fold it up. And now what happens is when you come to that revelation, you give everybody else a point of reference to react to in advance. So that's one way around it. If somebody's a skeptic, so again, it depends on the character. If somebody's a skeptic, you're going to turn around and say to that person, you've been proven to be a skeptic, which means that even if I guess what you were thinking of, you're probably going to change your mind. So take this, write it down. Now there's no way you can change your mind. And it also means that if I get it wrong, you can gloat. So you've got that beautiful different ends of the spectrum, but you're using their character as the reason. One, I don't want people thinking you're just agreeing with me. And two, you're a skeptic, so of course you're going to change your mind. So I hope that really helps. But let's have a look at this. I've heard you talk a lot about story and character. Do you have a favourite character in film or television, and what's your favourite movie? So David Priest, that's a great question. So David, thank you for the question. My favourite movie is Big Fish, and it's a movie by Tim Burton, and it's a really incredible movie by Edward Bloom. And today, I literally just thought about that film today. I was reading something in a book today, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. And then I thought, I remember reading this, and I went back through my notes on my phone, and just at the side of it, it said crap. And that were 6 years ago or 7 years ago. So I'd read something 6 years ago, and it said crap at the side of it. And I reread it now where I am in life with the perspective and view that I have on things, and it were a revelation to me. And it reminded me of the scene where Edward Bloom visits Spectre for the first time, and he ends up there too early, and then he was supposed to come later, and then he leaves, and then he comes back later in life, and it says that basically a man will see things twice, never see things the same twice in their life. And that bit of the movie struck me as soon as I read that bit. So if you haven't seen Big Fish, go out and watch it with the inspiration for the Bigger Fish books and the Bigger Fish files. So Bigger Fish 1, Bigger Fish 2, and the Bigger Fish files set. And it really taught me the importance of the story. And it taught me the importance of being able to help me build my character, because looking at that film, there was such an emotive story that drove the back of it. But what I really loved is that nobody believed the things that Edward Bloom had experienced. And I'm not going to ruin the movie for you, but later on in the film, there's a series of revelations, and that's all I'll say. So watch that film. It's a really great film. I'd go as far as saying that he's one of my favourite characters in film. And also Kaiser Soze. I think Kaiser Soze from The Usual Suspects. If you've not seen The Usual Suspects, go watch The Usual Suspects, because that's an incredible film, again, with a really nice ending. Hey, Oriasha here. I was playing with numbers in Propolis Mentalism. When I started exploring this niche, I noticed it was massively avoided by many creators. Why do you think this is? So, Ori, nice to see you. I think the reason that numbers are avoided in any type of mentalism is because it's seen as something that's analytical. And anything that's analytical is avoided because mentalism tends to be creative. And what I mean by that is, think of a memory, which is creative. Think of a drawing, which is creative. Think of a song, which is creative. Think of a celebrity, which is creative. And all these things feel like really warm thoughts. And then when you say to somebody, think of numbers, unless there's an emotional attachment to those numbers, they feel cold and analytical. But that doesn't mean that they're not important. It really doesn't mean that they're not important. What it means is that you've just got to learn to frame them in a way that's interesting. But people avoided them because they felt there were going to be some arduous process. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I'm very honest on these lives. In the past, I've talked about things that can play really well, and very seamless, or they have to go on a little bit longer. And sometimes that mathematical process can be like juggling. It can be like tightrope walking. It doesn't look very good. So it depends on what your process is. If your process is, okay, think of this number. Okay, now you've got a number. Now double it. And again, I was watching a video recently. I'm not going to say whose it was, but I was watching this video recently. And I promise you the presentation went like this. Okay, so I want you to think of a number. Got one? Okay, now I want you to add 5 to that number. Have you done that? Okay, now I want you to times it by 2. Have you done that? Okay, now I want you to add 100. Have you done that? Perfect. Now I want you to times it by 15. Have you done that? Now I want you to divide it by 2. Have you done that? Now I want you to take away your original number. Have you done that? Now I want you to add in the year you were born. Have you done that? And it went on for about 8 minutes, just somebody repeating the same thing over and over and over again. And it was like so monotonous. So I think what happens is that we see things like that as mentalists, and it's not appealing. It's not appealing when we watch it, and therefore it's not going to be appealing when we come to want to deliver it. So we're looking for something that is quick and easy. And unfortunately, as soon as you say that there's maths involved, people switch off. People just aren't bothered, and I think that's why it is. But I don't think that there's something missing from there. So I think that if you're not into numbers, I think it's a really good area to look at, because there's so many interesting niches and subsets in the mathematical community that you can take and adapt and turn into things for what we do, So let's have a look. This is Lewis Gordon. Thank you for coming on to the chat. How would you write a stage show? So it depends. Again, it depends if I'm writing a stage show for myself, which is something that I don't often do. I've run a few of them, but I have a full stage show written. I've rehearsed it. It's tight. I could go out and do it whenever I needed to do it. I'd obviously just, tighten it up a little bit before I went. But if I'm writing it for somebody else, it depends on the subject matter. For me, the very first thing that I do, and this is the biggest secret I'm going to ever give you to anything that I do, is a lot of my marketed methods are not like the methods you'll find in my videos, and they're not like the methods that I'll advise somebody else to use. And that sounds ridiculous, because you're there going, wait a minute, you don't advise your products. I don't choose methods. What I do, the very first thing that I do is I sit and I say how the show should look. So we talk about stories, we talk about interesting hooks, we talk about things that look visually appealing, something that can tell a story without having to physically do anything. So it might be a prop that just instantly tells a story, whether it's a spirit cabinet or whether it comes down to an interesting looking journal or a pad, or is there going to be a visual of a VHS tape that's playing, and we find a story, and we find, wouldn't it be interesting to say, I'm just making this up now, but wouldn't it be interesting to have a room full of spikes, and we invite somebody up on stage, and we tell them there's one spike in all these bags, and they slam their foot down on it and it's empty, and we get a little applause, and then we reveal that every other bag had spikes in it. I'm just making this up. So, but then after we've got the story of what's what, then we've got that, then we'll start to find a method. So we always write the narrative first, we always write the story first, we always let the character shine throughout that, and more importantly, the bridge between one effect and another, because there's nothing worse than looking at them like set pieces. I always hate it when this piece is so disjointed from this piece, and this piece is disjointed from this piece, and it's all got to flow very nicely. And one piece of advice I give somebody the other day, and they just couldn't get their head around it, is I said, look, check out comedians, have a look at comedians. And they were like, well, I'm not a comedic magician, I don't do comedic mentalism. I'm like, you're missing the point. Like, forget what they're doing, forget what the comedian's doing. The reason it's interesting to watch them is because it's just them and a microphone. And if you can entertain somebody for over an hour with just a microphone, you're already off to a good start. And then you pack the lights on top, the sound on top, and everything else, and it becomes really interesting. And they're like, but what does that have to do with watching a comedian? I say, well, let's have a look at a comedian's opening joke. Is it 1:30? If it's just them and a microphone and it's 1:30, try to find an act that you can wrap in 1:30. Comedians do this interesting thing called a callback, where they'll make a joke, they'll let some time happen, and then they'll sting you with the same joke later on. So can we do that? Is there a way we can use a callback in mentalism? What are the beats? Okay, so they've used it in the second performance, and then they're reusing it in the sixth performance. So that's already given us a good indication of how hard this hit an audience. And all we've got to do is find a comparable piece of mentalism that we can call back to in this performance. And now when you start to string it all together, and you think about what the story is and how you want to portray what it is, it could be anything. It might be that you're talking about somebody in an insane asylum. It might be that you're talking about, skill sets. Let's say it's senses. I've taken which is a Ned Rutledge quote, I've taken my 5 senses and I've heightened them to create a 6th sense. Is there anybody in this audience right now that's lacking 1 sense? Raise your hand. So they raise their hand, and then you say, or just shout out if you can't raise your hand, whatever. And then you say to them, I find it really interesting that what you do is you've taken your 4 other senses and you've substituted the sense that's missing. And it now might be something to do with senses. The show might have 6 parts in it. And I know there's more than 6 senses. I know there's more than 5 senses, but I know there's more than 6. But it might be that each part of the show is about one of the senses. And then you find something interesting and you look up interesting stories about people in the real world that did natural things with those senses, and then you try to replicate those stories, or you look like you're experimenting and you're just the conduit that's making it happen. So again, building a stage show is a very intricate process, and it depends how long you've got to do it. The worst mistake you can make in the world, and I see this all the time, it happens all the time, is I've bought 10 marketed effects and I'm just going to slap those 10 marketed effects in. What's the story we can build around them? It's the absolute worst thing that you can do. Never do that, because your stage show is going to stink of unoriginality. Every man and the dog that's ever been able to buy anything from a retail store will be able to pick it up. And I heard of a test that I thought were really interesting a few years ago, and it's called the Google test. And I thought this were a wonderful read. I read about this. I can't even remember where I read about it. But it's one of the most wonderful reads that I've ever had. And it's this, is think about the Omni deck. Now, a lot of people know my distaste for the Omni deck, but just imagine the Omni deck and think about how you describe it as a layperson. What is it? Deck of cards turns into glass block. So you type exactly how they'd say it into Google and hit enter. If a result comes up, don't use that effect. You've blown your act, because somebody Googles that, deck of cards turns into glass block. And if it comes up, it's done for me. So that's why originality sometimes comes from finding a method. And if that's not possible, find the story, find what it is that you're doing, and then find the closest marketed effect possible, and then slightly change it so it matches what you need. And you might find actually that you start finding original methods, and those neurological pathways build, and it becomes easier to design an act. Whilst on the subject of designing acts, I did get asked a question in the last live that I never got round to, and I want to get round to it in this, and it's regarding marked cards. Now, there's a reason that I mentioned this. I'm going to share with you a method, a technique, and it was how to best use marked cards. And these are the Resurrected deck. I don't know if you can see them from there, but they have a beautiful back design. They've got the Ouija board on the back. The reason this is so interesting is that when you pull a regular deck of cards out, what people do is go, I know this one, before you've ever done anything. The response I've had from these when you buy a little velvet bag and you tuck them inside it is, wow, like, are you going to show me something psychic? Because they already attribute the planchette and the Ouija board back to something that's supernatural. So they're waiting and intrigued to see what it is that you're going to do. And there's a reason that I mentioned that. If you go into the description box in this video, I don't know where it is, but in the description box, there's 15 of these decks available. That's it. That's all that's left on this planet. There's no more of them other than the couple that I've got to use for myself. And we actually managed to get hold of a little box of them. My friend Steve managed to find and track down the person that had the cards, and we got a box of them before Blackpool, but they're the last 15 decks. And these are beautifully produced. They feel so nice. They're not rough like the Resurrected ones. But go down to the link, click it. You can get them the £20 for and that's including postage, for a marked deck of cards with a beautiful design on the face. The court cards have had the eyes blacked out really beautifully. Every one of the aces looks beautifully custom designed. It's got an anatomical heart and a knuckle duster and a knife for the club. It's just a really beautiful deck to use. But I want to share with you a method with a marked deck. And this fits into the ethos of what I always think. And this goes back to creating a stage show. It goes back to creating any piece of mentalism. Whatever anybody's doing, run in the opposite direction. And what I mean by that is, if you see everybody doing things this way, look at the reverse of that and ask yourself, what's the reverse? Always look at the reverse. Flip it. If somebody's bending a spoon, straighten a spoon. This is going to be a really weird one, but let's say that you've seen 1,000 people levitate. How many people have you seen fall from the sky and survive? Do you know what I mean? It's an interesting thought process. It doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a method, but it's interesting. And the reason that I mention this is because that's the exact philosophy that I use when it comes to a marked deck. So what I'll do is I'll ask somebody to take the cards and shuffle them. And I'll say to them, right, I want to show you what mind reading looks like. So I might do a piece of mind reading. And now I'm going to degrade the use of cards. So whether you use cards in mentalism or not, it really doesn't matter, because you're not going to be the one that's using them. And I do that in inverted commas. So you do a piece of mentalism and you say, I'd like to teach you to be able to do this, but you're never going to be able to guess a word. You're never going to be able to guess something that's so astronomically impossible that takes years and years. But what I can do is I can teach you what to look for in order to read a playing card that's on somebody's mind. So I'm thinking of a card. What I want you to do is just go through that deck, look at me. First, don't worry about anything. Just think about the color and then look at me. And now I make an interesting comment here. I always say it doesn't matter, because they're never going to get this wrong. But I always say that's not the correct color. It's not the correct color, so change your mind. Okay, I'm not helping you from here on out. So now you've changed on the color, decide on the suit. And now I want you to go through and I want you to think of the value that you think I'm thinking of. Now I'm going to ask you one question. Do you think you're bang on there, or do you think you're just close? But don't tell me what you're thinking of. So they go, I'm close. And I say, okay, how many do you feel you're out by? And they say 2. Okay, so adjust it. Look at me. Decide whether you think that's the card I'm thinking of. Go through the deck and just place it down there. So now they go through, they go like this, they place it down. So let's say they've placed it down there. I know this is the 6 of hearts. Right, I know that because these are marked. They place it down in front of me. I look at the marking just casually. I say, so, but not yet. You've got to wait for the right moment. So I look at them and I say, now think about this. You looked at me and you were thinking as we went along, the makeup of each part of this card. And you decided on this. And as I said this, I look down and I cover the relevant bit to look where the marking is, right? And at that moment, I look at it, I see it's 6 of hearts. And I say to him, when we first started this, I could see when you were looking in my eyes that you felt that I were thinking of a black card. Am I correct in saying that? Now they've got to say yes, because they changed their mind. Then you say to them, and I'm hoping you change to a red card. And then they start smiling and you go, you didn't even dwither on the suit. You just knew that I were thinking of a heart, correct? And they go, yeah. I say, I hope you change the number though. And now let's say it were a 4 that they've picked. You know, they were thinking of a 2 or a 2 or a 6. Chances are it's a 6 that they were thinking of just in that environment, because a 2 is less probable. That's just based on research. But then you go, I'm hoping though at the last second you change your mind from 6, because I changed my mind from 6, and they smile. And I go, we're thinking of the 4 of hearts. And then they react. I go, let me see. And now I act shocked and I turn it around and I go, great. So let's tighten that up a little bit so that you can see what it looked like. So we've just done a piece of mind reading. And I'll run it through exactly how it would be performed. I'd say, now you've obviously seen me doing what it is that I do. And I want to share with you exactly how I do it. This is going to sound really strange. This is not something that's psychic and it's not scientific. It's the grey area that exists between the two. And I'm going to teach you how to do that. Have you ever done that thing where you've thought about somebody and then the phone rings and it's that person and they say yes, and you say, try to imagine that happening right now, but don't worry about your phone ringing. So they do, and you say, stop. That feeling right there is what we're going to tap into. We're not going to do something astronomical like a word, because you'll never be able to pick up on that. But what you can pick up on is a playing card. So we'll start small. Let's start with the colour. So look at me. Think of the colour of the playing card you think I'm thinking of right now. So they do, and you go, you're questioning yourself. It's not that colour, so change your mind. So they change their mind. Look at me. Just decide on the suit. Don't even think about it. Just go for it. Use those feelings. Now the value. Now I'm going to ask you, do you think you're close, or do you think you're miles out? Close. Okay, how many do you think you're out by? Just a couple. Okay, so readjust. Take your time. If you need to change the card, change it now. It's your last opportunity. Go through and take out the card you think I'm thinking of. So they go through, they take it out, they place it down. As soon as it's been placed down, you then look at them and you say, every single detail you created yourself. Now I'm hoping that when we started this, you felt I were going for a black card, and then you change your mind. And then I get my first reaction and I go, and this card, and I look down, get my marking, and like I've looked at this point, I know where it is. I've casually glanced. I'm not ever making this a big thing. If I don't catch it here, I'll pause a little bit, cover it, look, and now I'll start to reveal it. But you'll see the difference between getting into performance mode. I'm more relaxed, I'm more calm than I am when I'm describing this. So there's two characters that I'm playing, but hopefully you can see the difference between the two. And that's a good indication of character building, which I will cover in a later video. But that's how you use a marked deck in reverse. And there's no heat on the markings. Why is there no heat on the markings? Because you're not the one doing the piece of mind reading, they are. So it's a beautiful way to cover your back in that situation and not have to think about it. So I hope that helps. Like I say, there's only 15 of these decks available. There's no more on the planet Earth. There's no more at any other vendor or retailer. So if you want one, just head into the description and go and get one. You're probably going to have to be quick. But if you go over to www.sleight-of-mind.co.uk or www.peterturner.co.uk if you're in a pinch, and you'll see the other products that are on there. And whilst we're on the subject of that someday, just ask me about Volume 13, Standing on the Shoulders of Giants. Sorry, I'm just lighting this so we have a bit of haze, a bit of atmosphere in the background. So Standing on the Shoulders of Giants were an interesting booklet or a PDF that I wrote a long time ago. And the reason it's interesting is because I always say that we stand on the shoulders of giants. Everything that we do is based off the back of somebody else's philosophies. And I believe that it's up to us to pick up where they left off. So pick your favourite artists, pick the people that inspire you the most, look at their philosophies. You don't have to agree with every one of them. Animan's my absolute favourite creator of all time. And I read some of the 202 Forces and I just sit there and think this is an absolute bag of something. But I always find something because I go, okay, well, what's the makeup of this? We're trying to force something out of 8 piles. How would I do this? And it sets me a challenge. But then I read other things of Animans and I go, this is so far ahead of its time that it's absolutely unbelievable. And Animan changed my life, you know. So, yeah, so the honesty is that's, you know, how I use a marked deck. Just think of things in reverse. Stand on the Shoulders of Giants is a PDF that's just based on that. So let's have a little look. My love is mentalism, but everyone I perform for loves my close-up visual magic. Should I adapt to what everyone likes or what? How do I do what I love but also keep it audience focused? Okay, so I think the question there is I really love close-up magic, but no, everybody else really loves my close-up magic, but my heart tells me that I'm going to be a mentalist. The honesty is this, is that the audience that you're performing to right now is an audience that you must know, because people that don't know you don't know that you do close-up magic. Hopefully that makes sense. So retain the close-up magic for the people that you're performing for now. Slip in a few pieces of mentalism in between and maybe reveal that in an interesting way. So if you're very good at visual magic, find ways to use that close-up magic to reveal the mentalism. So you're not losing the close-up visuals of the close-up magic, but what you are doing is you're interjecting the mentalism, and you can tell them that you're working on that stuff. And if they see a change over time, they'll accept that change. Slow but sure. If you're meeting audiences that you don't know, they don't know what you do. So just get better at doing the mentalism if that's something you want to do, and go present it exactly how you want to present it. So let's have a look at this. So how can we use mentalism? I don't even know where that's just gone. I think that said, how can we use mentalism in our everyday lives? And again, you're going to have to excuse me because I'm a little bit of a boomer when it comes to this stuff, so I'm doing my best. But how do we use mentalism in our everyday personal lives? So like dating, networking, etc. You know what? The honesty is that when it comes to dating, it's the most embarrassing subject in the world for me. You know, I think that when it comes to dating, unless you're meeting somebody that already understands what it is that you're doing, it's very difficult for regular people, and when I say regular people, lay people, I don't like using that term, but regular people, to really accept what it is that you're doing, because it sounds cheesy. And if it doesn't sound cheesy, it sounds intriguing, but they believe that you know all this stuff that you might not necessarily know. You might, depends how good you are, but you might not, you know, they believe this stuff. So I've had it backfire, and I've had people, for example, families of people that have checked out my videos and looked at my work in the past or seen me at a live show, and what they've said is, oh, you know, it's dangerous stuff, is that. I don't like that he plays with that hypnosis stuff. You don't know, he might be mind controlling you to do things that you don't want to do. And, you know, and then the one time that person's not acting like themselves and it's nothing that you've done, all of a sudden it's, oh, you know, he's influencing you to do X, Y, and Z. You know, I had it, a friend of mine, I'm not going to go into names, but a friend of mine got punched by another friend of his, so they were both just friends, but punched him because he went and got a tattoo, and it had nothing to do with me. I didn't know the guy when he got booked in for the tattoo, but his friends saw me and were like, oh, you've been hanging around with him and all of a sudden you want tattoos now, you know. And so there's a car going past and beeping, I apologize for that, but yeah, you know, with that, you just got to accept it for what it is. So in the dating world, I always just think lead as a person first and bring that in second. If you're talking about how to use that stuff for dating, I don't really know, it's because it's not something that I really lead with, if that sort of makes sense. I'm more interested in talking about my bikes and my cars, and I'm more interested in talking about my filmmaking. I'm more interested in talking about my photography, and also like books that I like to read and films. I lead with that. I'm a person first, and then when it comes up, and I always try not to tell anybody about what it is that I do until it's absolutely necessary. So it's not like I'm running to show them something. And a lot of the time, because they've got to know me as a person, it's more digestible for them. But the honesty is, look, I'm not, I'm not dating. I'm not out doing that. I'm not out meeting people or talking to people. But I am, however, networking. So I understand how to use it in a network capacity. And using it in a networking capacity, it depends how much you want to lie. You know what I mean? I'm not, and this is me being very honest, it depends how much you want to lie. It's not something I do because I'm not interested in it. But telling somebody that you're very good at hypnosis and therapy, and telling somebody that you're good at influence, and using like tricks that are influence based to convince people that you can teach sales staff, is a thing that I know. And I've been asked, I told you this earlier on in this live, I've been asked to fly out to places, and I've been open with them and said, look, I don't think it's going to help your business. I don't want to promise services that I can't provide. What I can do, and then just go into teaching them to perform and whatnot. But networking, it's a great thing, and it's opened doors for me. Look, let's be realistic. Look at the video from 10 years ago, in the Blackpool video, and I keep referencing it, but look at the video from 10 years ago or 12 years ago to now, and it's opened so many doors. I've worked with the England rugby squad, I've worked with Jurgen Klopp, I've worked with Ellen DeGeneres, I've worked with AGT, I've worked on BGT, Poland's Got Talent, Italy's Got Talent, Norway's Got Talent. I've worked on a lot of these different shows. I've met celebrities in Holland. I've met, I've sat with Demi Lovato, and I've sat with people like, I've been on Tony Hawk's skate ramps, and I've sat with different people like Stephen Bartlett and had the opportunity to talk to them. I've become friends with the likes of Stone Roses frontman Ian Brown because of my connections in this world. So using it in networking, but I'm always myself first, and I never use what I'm doing now to connect. So I'm not purposefully going, I'm in a room with Tony Hawk, I've got to do what I'm doing now and connect with them. It's not like that. If they naturally want to talk to me, then I'm not going to push away that connection. I don't fight for that connection. I'm just me. And then that comes second. So using it in dating and networking, I'm very sure that it's a potent tool to use in dating. You know what I mean? I think that you probably be able to go out there and pick girls up, or guys, or whoever it is that you want, guessing star signs if you wanted to. Do you know what I mean? Guessing the name of their first kiss or whatever. There's a million ways you could frame it to do that, but it's just not something that I do. It doesn't mean that you don't have to do it, but just frame it that way if that's what you wanted to do. So let's have a look at this. Let's keep going through. First time the hand stick. So this is Little Bear's Land. The first time the hand stick and it worked, people were so blown away they thought their guy had to be on it. Thank you so much for teaching it on how to control minds. Thank you for getting it. So the hand stick's one of those interesting things that you just got to have the cherries to do it. It's like you've just got to stand there, look somebody in the eyes and tell them exactly what it is that's going to happen. And I've got a... And when I say this, I'm going to sound so delusional. I watched this guy on YouTube called Danny G, and if you're interested in watching a guy, he's such an interesting character. Like, there's a channel called Delusional Danny G, and I love watching his stuff. And 2 days ago, he put a video of him playing golf, and he claims that he could beat Tiger Woods, but he's probably the worst golf player on planet Earth. And then the next video, he's talking about how he beat 20 people up in a dressing gown using his kid's bicycle as a weapon. It's just a channel of people saying stuff. So when I make this next comment, it's going to sound delusional, but I promise you it's 100% true, and it's solely based on experience. But I call it the magic eye. And whenever I'm doing any sort of hypnosis, I'm very good at being able to pick out the person I think it's going to work on. Or maybe it's just that when I pick that person, I'm so confident in thinking that that's the case that it works. And that's it. So just keep doing that. So let's have a little look here. Just out of curiosity, what is the reason behind that the tricks and the content in the bigger fish files and the how to control minds overlap? So there's not very much overlap in those two bits. The Jedi choke is one of the pieces that overlaps in there. Maybe there's one other thing in there. I'm not sure. But it's one of those things that you learn a lot about presenting this stuff later down the line. So when I'm compiling something, so I'll give you an example. Let's say that I were doing a book on any card at any number right now. And in the past, I've talked about any card at any number on, say, my Vanishing Ink lecture, or back in the Murphy's lecture from in the day. If I'm doing a compilation of things from any card at any number, and that's a good version of it, there's a lot of people that didn't know me back then that are just getting to know me now. And I think that losing that out of a compendium of things like that, it's a bit of a shame, because I like it all in one place at one time. I try to make the overlap as little as possible. Now, in the early days, there was some overlap, but I try to make it as manageable and as little as possible. You know, you'll find the 21 trick here and you might find it there, but I don't assume that everybody's watching this here and everybody's watching that there. So for me, it's just a case of, if I'm compiling something like I did Midas Touch I did Midas Touch on its own, then I did Midas Touch on the How to Control Mindset, and I added extra ideas, and then I did Midas Touch in my PK book. But then you look at the PK book and it expands upon that so much. For example, using it to be able to force things, using it to be able to clean up bits of dual reality, using it so that there's a hot coin, but using a PK whisper, using different attributes to working one ahead with a PK touch, or being able to do PK touches over the phone. That's in the PK book. That's again over at sleightermind.co.uk. But there is some crossover there, but I expand upon it, or I'll add a different slant on it, or if it's just the same, the sole reason that it's just the same being inserted is because it's a compendium of things like that, and it almost feels like it'd be lacking if that wasn't in there. So I hope that makes sense. But some points there's bound to be overlap with stuff, and the honesty is I don't remember everything that I've put everywhere, and that's another thing. Sometimes it just, they might say, oh, we want 10 of these things, and I'll go, okay, these are the best 10 that I've got, and that's it. And there's no malice in it. What percentage of your stage performance consists of risky jazz style material? I'm aware it's not completely risky since you have ABC plans. So the honesty is, and this is something, again, I know I've said this a few times, but I'm going to talk about this Legends video. Nothing that I do is risky. Nothing that I do is risky. I call them the sprinkles, and I talked about this at Blackpool, and anybody who came to see me at Blackpool, I have a very interesting way of looking at things, and that interesting way of looking at things is this. I find that everybody's applying a method when people are expecting there to be a method. What I do is I apply the method in the fairest moment in a routine. So, for example, go back to like the almost perfect drawing duplication and take a look at that. I'm sprinkling the method in. So, like, for example, if somebody's shuffling something, I'll try to put the method in the shuffle. Because if the method's in the shuffle, or the shuffle kills the method, and I inverted commas kills the method, there would be no method. And then when it comes to a bit where nothing's happening, what I'll do there is I'll make it seem like I'm taking a risk, or I might take a risk. So I'm weaving in multiple performances simultaneously in close-up. So if there's dead time happening whilst I'm doing something here, I'll be setting the next effect up over here. So this person might be shuffling cards, might be doing something, might be writing something down over here. I'm setting the next effect up over here. That's held. I come back, finish this up, nail it, then move into this seamlessly. And there's not very much of an element of risk. Everything that I do, I'd say, is pretty grounded in traditional methodology. But what I will do is in between, I'll take certain chances. So in between these solid bits, I'll find the openings where I feel there might be a moment of dead time, or I'll find the moment where I feel I can take a risk with something. But remember, the audience never know where you're going. And because the audience never know where you're going, the greatest thing in the world is, as a mentalist, you need a baseline as to how somebody thinks. So if it hits, then great. So for example, if you're throwing a paper ball out, let's talk about the disposable colour. Let's say I have a risky word divination thing, and I throw a paper ball, throw it again, somebody names a word out loud, it lands, open the paper ball, it's inside it. If it doesn't land, then all I do is I turn around and say, okay, you were picked at random, what is it you're thinking of? And now I give them a reason why they thought or what they were thinking of, and I say, I think I know the perfect thing for you, join me up here. So the elements of risk don't really apply. It's not like I'm just jazzing. And I learned a long time ago that when you're on a stage show or any performance of that kind, any paid performance, it's just not worth taking risks for main things. It's just not worth it, unless you're doing a section that's purposefully about jazzing, and it's about how that you're using your wits and you're just picking up on things in the moment. This might work, it might not. So let's say it's an any card, any number sequence in a show, then you can afford to take those risks, but you need to learn how to clean them up. So I hope that answers your question. But if I'm performing socially, I have nothing to lose. Like, look, nobody's paying me to, if I'm working in a social situation, nobody's paying me to get this right. And I talked about this again at LEMS. I was just interviewed. I say an interview. I were on with New York Magazine. There's a phenomenon called the telepathy tapes in America that did the rounds and apparently knocked Joe Rogan off the #1 podcast spot. and they wanted to delve into the ways that this might be potentially possible. And they reached out to me, and I thought it was such a, you know, compliment that New York Magazine are reaching out to me to discuss the telepathy tapes. And I talked about it in there, and watching those videos, there were a couple of risks that I saw these people taking, but these risks made for headlines. So if there is a time that you can take a chance, you know, but it's got to be the right time, and timing's everything. And that's the key. That's the real secret behind that stuff. So let's have a look at this. You talk a lot about character and story. Do you have a favorite character? I've read that one. Let's have a little look. Hey Pete, Gabriel here from Singapore. Any plans to do a project with Luke Germain and Luis Laval in the future? Or maybe with Danny De Ortiz on card psychological forces? So I've worked with Luis. I've done quite a lot of work with Luis. I love Luke Germain. Like, you know, maybe in the future at some point I could talk to Luke about doing something. Luke's sort of on his path and I'm on mine. And Luke and I were good friends at one point. I say good friends. I consider him a good friend. I don't know if he considered me one, but we spent quite a bit of time hanging around together in York and places like London and Manchester and Newcastle. Like, I met him on a number of occasions, and I used to go to his stage shows. He's a wonderful performer, and if I could do something with Luke, I think it'd be an interesting jam session. So maybe down the line, who knows? But you know, there's no promises in that regard. In regards to Luis, I was just on the phone with Luis last night, and Luis and I are always talking about things backwards and forwards. We're always jamming, and again, if you go look at the last thing that Luis did over at Mindhouse, I think I'm featured on it. So let's keep going. Can you give us an idea of how you present DFB? So, Professor T, this one's a really interesting one because I almost have to get into performance mode for it. But I have 5 different routines for DFB. So like I have 5 different variants. And one variant I find really interesting, I'm just going to see if I can load it up. In fact, I have no internet on that, so I won't be able to load it up. But I don't know if it uses the internet. I'm a bit of a boomer, but I'll just talk you through it. It's probably easier. So the easiest one in close-up is, let's say I know I'm going to go into the top 100 movies of all time, and this is a corporate situation where I've got to get around people relatively quickly. I add one element in there that I've never seen anybody else add, and if somebody else has done this, I apologise. It's just the way that I do it. What I'll do is I'll write down the Wizard of Oz, or whatever it is that I'm trying to force. And if you don't know what DFB is, it's Digital Force Bag. And it's an app that allows you to force whatever you want to force from a list. And what I'll do is I'll walk in and I'll say to somebody, can you just take hold of this for a second? I say, I want you all to think of a number from 1 to 100. And I want you just to pass this around until one of you feels compelled to stop, but let it go around a few times. So now this piece of paper goes round a few times, and then somebody stops. And I open my phone, I say, what were the number you were thinking of? So they say 84, so I go, do what I've got to do, turn and I say, what number did you go for? And they go, 72. What number did you go for? 16. What number did you go for? And then whoever's is closest, so let's say they say 16, I say, if we'd have gone with 16, it had been this. If we'd have gone with your number, it would have been this. If we'd have gone with yours, it would have been this. But yours, and I ask them for it one more time, I go up, there it is. And now when I get to this person here, I turn around and say, okay, so Wizard of Oz. I say, you know, I find it really interesting. I think everything in life happens for a reason. I feel that I was supposed to meet you. I feel that you were all supposed to think of the numbers that you thought of. I feel that that piece of paper was supposed to be passed around exactly how it was meant to be passed around, and it stopped exactly where it was meant to stop. If you don't believe me, 72, it were Wizard of Oz. Open it up and take a look, and they open it, it says Wizard of Oz. And then everybody goes crazy, and it's a big reaction. So that's one way to do it in corporate. It's very quick, it's very clean, it's very easy, but I get the free added element of it stopping in the right place, which is again similar to what I do when I'm doing Invisible Deck. If I don't do that, but if I were ever going to use Invisible Deck, it'd be passed around and everybody would be thinking of a card, and the one person that had it would have the card that's the wrong way around. The method that, or the variant that I prefer, is not that. So I actually have a list, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this list, but I'll try to find it. And the list, let's have a look at this, is called My People. So celebrities, it's on my performance phone, so it's not on this one. So it shows you how long it's been since I've done this. But I have another phone for performances that solely just has what I need on it, and then I have my actual phone, and I use that just to reference stuff. But what I have is a list called My People, and I delete out about 40 of those or 50 of those people. I delete a lot of them out, and in their place I just put dashes. And then what I do is I write down the names of the people in my life that mean the most to me. Now, when you're thinking about this, it probably seems really scatty, but when I perform it and I show you what it is that I say, you'll really understand the power behind this. So I'll just be having, and this is just in social situations, I'll be having a casual conversation with somebody, And as I'm having that casual conversation, I'll start smiling and I'll just stop them for a second. You're not going to believe this. Just give me a second. And I'll stop and I'll pause. And it's very hammy when there's not another person there and there's conversation going on. But I'll say, I've just got the strangest sense of deja vu I've ever had in my life. Don't say anything else for a second. What's your full name? And now I'll open my set list and I'll put their name in the list. So I'll put theirs as the number or the item that I want to force. And then I lock the phone. And I say, I think I've met you before. And they say, no. I say, I'm sure we've met before. I said, do you know what deja vu is? And this is a really beautiful line. Do you believe in the circle of life? And they say yes or no. Most of the time they'll say yes, because you're dealing with people that are already of a mystical sort of inclination. So, do you believe in the circle of life? They say yeah. Say, what's interesting about a circle is it's got no breaks. That means that your very first and your very last breath are the exact same thing. And they say that when you're leaving this life, it's almost going into the light. But where I find that interesting is if you take into account the circle of life, maybe as you're going towards that light, it's actually you coming into the light in an operating theatre. And the reason that you come out crying is because you're grieving for the life that you left behind. And there's only really one thing that stops grief, and that's time. It never truly goes away, but it helps. But every so often what happens in life is that life will come along and poke holes in time and space to remind you of your past life. I feel we have met before, just not in this lifetime. And of course the way we look changes, our names change, but there's one thing that never changes, and it's numbers. I think I met you in a past life. If I had met you in a past life and you were to give me a number from 1 to 100, that's the game that I play with everybody that's my people. What would the number be? And they say 76. And now I open it. I say, you can see there's a lot of gaps. And we go down, and then their name's at 76, and it confirms that we met in a past life. I think there's something interesting in that. Now, again, I haven't performed it for a while, but that I think it's a really interesting way to perform DFB. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of something. What do you think the key to selling a Q&A act is, propless or otherwise? So this is Midrin, so I know Midge very well. Hey Midge. I think it's just to be interesting. Like, look, let's take a look at vaudevillian parlor acts. You know, they had some really interesting stuff. If you go back to the 1948, I believe it's 48, it might be 44, I think it's 48, the 1948 version of Nightmare Alley that's on YouTube, and you can watch it for free. That is a film that's solely based around the two-person telepathy act. And what's really interesting about the two-person telepathy act, or the two-person code act, is that usually there'd be a code that'd exist, and they'd mix that in with a Q&A. So one of them would read the information, transmit it to the other person then deliver that information. Of course, over time, the Q&A act whittled itself down so that there wasn't just a sender and a receiver and a Q&A box. It was just somebody literally plucking out questions and then answering them. And that act might even, you go back to like Ask Alexander and stuff like that. So that act might even predate all that. There's a lot of different variations of stuff that have come and gone, but predominantly it'd be two people. One of them would be the assistant and the other one would be the one that would be doing the reading. But what we're interesting in that film is that they start to genuinely become psychic and they pick up on a skeptic. And I think adding flavour and texture into selling your Q&A act is to change it from being Q&A. So you look at the spirit world. Spirit world use a thing called prayer cards. And you'll find a large fishbowl on a stage, and what happens is people write down on these, prayer cards, and they drop them into this bowl, and then people, take these and put them on the stage, and then people contact the dead and pass on messages and stuff like that. The cards aren't really relevant. The message that's coming from beyond the veil is the thing that's relevant. And therefore, when you're thinking like that, what's really interesting is that you've almost sidestepped that Q&A. So the Q&A act that I do is not like that. So my Q&A act, the way it works is I'll be on a stage, usually a parlor show that I have the control of the lights, and the phone will be in my pocket. And when the phone's in my pocket, at that particular point in the act, like I say, I have a working phone for performance. Only one person will have that phone number, so it can't ring by accident. And then whilst it's in my pocket, at a specific part in the show, I'll be talking and the phone will start to ring in my pocket. I take the phone out of my pocket and I put it on silent and I apologise and put it down on the table, and then it starts to buzz and move across the table. So it just buzzes, zzz, 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 and it's moving. And And I stop it again. I say, you know, it's really interesting that whenever I'm the most busy, that's when people seem to want to contact me. Is there anybody in this room that's just thought about getting rid of the phone and somebody puts their hands up? I say, do you want to come down for a second? They come down. I give them a pad. The pad's loaded. If you understand what that means, you understand what it means. I say, can you write down the name of somebody that would contact you on the phone, but you've got an in-joke, and then maybe write one sentence or one phrase that would only mean something to you two. So they do, but don't let me see it. So they do. I say, right, I'm going to turn around, show it to the rest of the audience. So they now show that to the rest of the audience. So I want everybody in the room to commit that to memory. It's going to be really important later on. When you're done, tear it out, roll it into a ball and just throw it over there. So they throw it off to the side of the stage. You can make your way back. Everybody else in the room, take out your mobile phones. Now, if you've got a notification, what I want you to do is just take your phone and put it underneath your chin. Don't respond to them. So they take their phone, they put it underneath their chin. And now as soon as they do that, the lights in the room drop. So the performance is now being survived by the sea of phone light. It's like little night lights that are floating in the audience, you know, little fireflies. And as the lights drop now, what I do is I go around and I pick up on the names of the people that have sent them the notifications. I pick up on those little intricate text messages and secrets between those people. And every single person I get right, I get them to take their phone and put it in their lap so their head disappears from the stage. And I go around one by one as the heads just disappear piece by piece by piece. And then at the end, I say, I'm really sorry I don't have time to get round to everybody. But I want you all to think about that message that Midrin wrote at the start. The contact and the message. And when you've got it in your head, just stare at me. And if I get this right, let me know by taking your phones and placing them face down. And now I'll reveal that. All the phones will go face down in the lap. The room will be blanketed in darkness. You can hear a pin drop. And then I say, you've got 15 minutes to answer those notifications. I'll see you in the second half of the show. And then boom, it rolls into the second half from there. Sidestep the traditional Q&A act, right? And what I mean by that is that try not to deliver it the same way that everybody else is. If it's a question inside a box and you're revealing the answer, I don't think it cuts the mustard. It looks like an incredible act and everybody feels it's impossible, but we've all seen it. You know, everybody's seen the semblance of a Q&A act. So if you want to sell it, find a similar sort of, use the box, use whatever you want, but sidestep. And like I did with the mobile phones there, you know, like sidestep the actual presentation and think about the presentation. And maybe the box is something that you're going to use. Maybe a device is something that you're going to use. But just like the prayer cards are people that are putting the deepest prayers into a card and somebody's taking those, moving them onto the stage. They pick them up, they hold them and they start to pick up on a message from beyond the veil. The card doesn't matter. And it's a beautiful way to make the card not matter because the message from beyond the veil outweighs the information that's written in the card. And it's just written there, and more often than not, they're just folding them inside out when they pick them up. And the flap on the inside's got the same cover on as on the outside. So when they fold it and they lift it up, they're looking at the information and that cover's facing outwards. So prayer cards, you know, mobile phones, to sell it, just make it different because then it feels original. And now people are just judging you based on your delivery as opposed to what it is that you're purporting to deliver. Let's have a look at this. Where's this? There we go. Sprinkles. Big Gex sending me a message saying the sprinkles. How would you handle a spectator finding markings if they have a little magic knowledge? Well, that comes down to a bigger question, right? And again, I'm jumping backwards and forwards here, but there's a bigger question at play there. If there's ever any suspicion of markings, then they're already suspicious of you beforehand, and you'll know signs of that. So then what you've got to do is you've got to mitigate the risk of being able to be found out by understanding that that person's already onto you. So play it safe at that point. What I do is I'd ask, is there a deck of cards in the room that we can borrow? If you're in a bar or something like that, they'll likely have them. If not, have them write a playing card down. Use your cleanest method to get the information that you need that proves that you can do it without cards first. Then say, look, you've just seen me do that, but people are going to think you're just agreeing with me. So I'll tell you what, take one out. And now they don't think about the marking on the back of the card because, again, you've sidestepped the method by putting one extra journey stop in between the journey. So you're putting that one stop in place before you get to it. So I hope that answers your question. And again, Midrin, it's anything propless. I have seen the remake of Nightmare Alley 2022, and I didn't think it was as good as the original, but you know, I think that they tried to go over the top. They're trying to go over the top. So Mitchell's just saying that he liked Casper's routine with numbers recently. He combines it with IS2. Like I say, it's, you know, these techniques are all things to look at, and it's horses for courses. What you might like might be different for me. I haven't seen Casper's thing, so I can't say whether I like it or not. And I'd be honest, he knows that. If you could use one method to gain information for the rest of your life, what would it be? It's a great question, and it'd probably be just listening and observing. Forget billets. I learn so much information when people don't know that you exist. That could be an act in itself. And if you look at the Eden Project by Grant Clark, that's a great way to, to deal with that. But just observation, using real techniques, sitting and just listening, paying attention to people's screensavers, you know, hovering over them when it sounds wrong to this, but when they're punching the PIN code into a PIN pad at the bar and then using that information later, gleaning information just by observing it whilst you're doing something else. So that's the best way. And observation is such a broad area of mentalism that it's not just one technique, but observation is the thing that I'd use. Need to sign off for now, Matt. I know you've signed off, but you're probably coming back later on. Your package is out. It's on the way to you. In fact, anybody that's watching this that's ordered off the website, every package is on the way, including the hats. I've just sometimes not updated it on the website to let people know that it's on the way out, but I try to do that every few days. So a postal company comes and takes them, but what I've done, I noticed that a couple of the packages had fallen through the cracks. So what I do now is I check personally the photographs that they send me of the parcels, and then I click fulfilled. And that might take me a few days depending on how long it takes them to go out and post. So if your order's not fulfilled, it doesn't mean it's not out the door. It just means that I've not double checked that it's definitely been posted. It just stops any products from falling through the cracks. But it's on the way. Everybody's products are. My answer to I've seen this one is, thank goodness I've forgotten what happens next, but can you tell me? That's Seb. I love Seb to pieces. Hello, Seb. If somebody says to me, like, I've seen this one, I just say, oh, you know, okay. Like, then you could, you know, as we're going through this, you can help me out. I try to get them on side, you know, like, I don't tend to find with mentalism that I really get that, because people don't really know where it's going. With a card trick, as somebody picks a card, I think the thing is that they realise that it's going to be found in some whimsical way, so they already can jump to the punchline. And I think unless it's a prediction, you know, and then a prediction when they say, I've already seen this, when you say, so have I, it's inside this envelope, but you'll see that later on. Outside of a prediction, you're not really telling anybody what it is that you're doing, and because you're not telling anybody what you're doing, they don't know where it's going. So you don't really get that with mentalism, but it's a great one. And Seb, let's catch up soon. Let's have a look at this. What's the best mind reading opener if you don't have billets or a peak wallet? So Quinton. Again, I know I've said this a couple of times in this and I'm not skirting around it. I want to do a full video on openers and then one on closers. So if you don't mind, I'll jump into that on that video, but I promise you that one's dedicated to you and I'll answer that then. Seb's laughing at force number 29 from 202 Methods of Forcing. I literally talked to Pigcake about this force earlier on. It is the most ridiculous. In fact, I'm going to read it. It's the most ridiculous force ever. So this is my Anneman book. I love Life and Times of a Legend. This is literally the Bible. And what I really love about this, if you were to go through it, you'd actually see that I've annotated everything. So I've written on everything. And this is my 202 Methods of Forcing, which is something I'm looking at in the near future. But let's go to force 29. It's the most unbelievable force of all time. And this is it. And actually, I don't know if you can see this on camera, but I've put WTF next to force 29 because it's that bad. But it's this: to force a pile with 2 dice, make 8 piles or 8 cards in 2 rows of 4 each. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Cards or piles 1 and 2 are alike, and one of the 2 is to be. And then underneath that, it just skips. So, and then it says for 2 count 1, 2, which is easy. You know, for 3 count 4, 3, 2, which is easy. For 4 count 4, 3, 2, 1, which doesn't work. For 5 count 8, 7, 6, 5, 1. It's like it's just a mess. It's an absolute mess. And Seb actually deciphered what it was, and even after he deciphered it, it was just a mess. It was just the worst force I've ever read out of any of the forces in 202 Methods of Forcing. How would you handle a spectator fan in the markets? We've done that. Reversals. That's it. That's the best advice on anything, is just reverse everything. This live remain on YouTube. It does. So if you don't see my live streams, click on my lives. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel, because it really helps me out and it actually keeps me consistent. And if I'm really honest, this is the first time in my life I've ever been consistent on social media in any regard. And it's only because you guys keep checking back in. It's because you leave me so many comments. It's because you're subscribing that I'm actually finding the motivation to share my films with you and to share my presentations and performances. So here we go. Look at that. Danny G from Smevic. That's right. That's him. He's friends with Sean Atwood. He is friends with Sean Atwood, and that interview is hilarious. Let's have a look at this. But yeah, please subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This might be inside baseball, but I wanted to ask on How to Read Minds. The phone unlock performed in Miami. The guy said, "That's not my code, but you unlocked his phone." I would love to know the backstory. I'll tell you the backstory of all, and what was said on the set is 100% true. And now this whole silly thing, and I've talked about this in the past, this whole silly thing, I've never bought a drink since 2015. These are the sort of lines that I never wanted to say. I never wanted to say lines like that. I think they're cheesy. Same as the spider pen in How to Read Minds too. I'm not denouncing what's inside those sets. There's some really nice stuff in there. But when you work for Illusionist, and when you're working with Illusionist, in your contract, it states that you're going to work as a team and you're going to do what's best for the team to collectively promote a product. And I hated wearing the Illusionist t-shirt and riding around like a Ken doll on a motorbike. And I've told Geraint this. This is not something that I'm hiding. It's not something that I'm hiding behind. I say it very openly. If you know me and you know me personally, if I have an issue, I'll say it to you. So this is not me talking behind the company's back. Company are great. Geraint's great. I'd work with them again because, we have a good stead. We've talked and everything's all right. But the thing that you must know is that when that whole scene on the patio, I sat down, it was the end of a shoot. I'd been out filming, decided to have a drink. It's like late at night, and then all of a sudden, bam, it's packed, and I'm just performing. So the honesty is, I don't even know what that performance was. I couldn't tell you the method for that. I know the method that I taught on there. Maybe it were a screenshot and I couldn't get into his phone because it didn't have the necessary thing to get into his phone. And therefore, when I was pretending to call it out, it might have been that I called out the wrong code and swiped up and made it look like I unlocked his phone. The honesty is that I don't know. I go into autopilot in that situation. And I think the book test that I used is different probably as well. Like, I'll perform a book test and then they'll say to me, share book tests, and I'll share 4 or 5 book tests. So, and that method might make it in, it might not. I don't really know. I'm a bit of one of these where if I sit down, I'll just perform what I feel at the time. If somebody challenges me, I'll do that again. I'll just do it again. So the honesty is, Matt, that I don't know. I was drinking and I don't know. And I don't mean that like I were tanked, because I wasn't, but it were a late night. I'd been working hours and hours and hours. I sat there. It might have been that he wrote his PIN code down earlier on, or it might have been that, I just used a screenshot. I don't know what method I used, and without watching it back, I can't give you a definitive answer, and I don't want to say something that would be wrong. So I will look into it, and I'll try to get back to you next time. Did I understand that right in your latest video that you and your wife got divorced? If so, I feel sorry. Long distance relationships can be a true test of love. Yeah, it's a bit of a subject that I'm going to swerve. It's an interesting one. I am still talking backwards and forwards. We're not arguing. We're not falling out or anything like that. She's a very successful producer. I'm not going to go into what it is she does. I'm not going to talk about her work in any way so that nobody can dox her. I don't think anybody would. But she's got her work. I've got mine. We live over 10,000 miles away, and we're realists. And that doesn't mean that I don't care for her. It doesn't mean that I don't have affection for her. It just means that some things in life don't work out. But it just couldn't have come at a worse time. I'm just going to plug my computer back in. Yeah, it couldn't have come at a worse time. It'd have been nice if it had happened afterwards, or it'd be nice if it had happened months before. But yeah, it just is what it is. I hope that gives you the answer, and thank you for feeling sorry. But there's nothing to feel sorry about. Look, we're living, we're breathing, we're moving forwards. We have a life, and we just do what we do. Gordon Astley, hello Gordon. Listen, your message. Sorry, I didn't manage to get back to it. I've got it. I intended to get back to it, but I was just working on. I just did an interview for the telepathy tape, so I did that. Then ended up working on a consultation for a stage show. Then I just picked up another consultation for a show that I'll be working on in Blackpool. So it's like, and this is not the Blackpool convention. This is a show that's actually running in Blackpool. So I've just been so busy. But we'll be trying the silent treatment in my reading session on Saturday. Any thought? So what Gordon's referring to there, and again, I know I keep redirecting you back to videos, but if you've not seen my freaking people out with mind reading, check that out. There's a bit where we sit silently, and we talked in the last video about how it were inspired by Marina Abramovich. And again, I know I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but it doesn't matter. And somebody corrected me last time. They'll probably be correcting me again. But I watched a 60-second documentary about a man that does it. And I thought it was really interesting. And I really wanted to experiment with it. So I just went around the country sitting down with people and not speaking. And so the thought on it is this, is just, look, I think that we say a lot with our eyes. And that's something that's really important to remember, is that sometimes you can, if somebody's already feeling slightly emotional, you can almost tip them over the edge by looking emotional yourself. And it's very hard when you sat looking at these people, because you know they're desperate for an answer to something. The wording's really important there. Think of a question you desperately need the answer to, and letting them have that release of being able to get it off the chest. They're not saying it out loud. So because they're not saying it out loud and they're not telling anybody else it, they feel like they're getting rid of, or they're shedding that, or being able to share it with somebody, and they've probably never been able to share what it is they want to ask with anybody else on the planet. And your eyes have just got to tell the story that you're receiving it, and just nod at them and smile at them. And then when it starts to feel emotional, get emotional with them and just match their energy, and you'll find really interesting results. So let's have a look at this. I'm a magician. I would love to switch to mentalism. Where do I start? Everybody tells me to read 13 steps. So Magic Stevens, I've said this in the last live, just take what you're already doing and turn it into mentalism. But I am going to do, and again, I keep talking about how I'm going to do all these videos, and I sit here feeling like I'm just being an idiot, but I'm going to do a video on what books to read when you're first getting into mentalism, and it'll surprise you, some of the books that I recommend, and how to take what you're doing in your mentalism and be able to use that in mentalism to better do what you do, or to get into it from magic. And I'll explain that. That'll be concise. So the next video that's going out is on character building, and the one after that is the resources that I'd recommend if you're moving from magic into mentalism, or it might be a good resource for those already in mentalism that have missed some of the things that I mentioned in there. So check that out. And that video, Magic Stevens, is going to be dedicated to you. I know how you detect these people. I mean the highly hypnotic ones. Okay, that's right. It's a really great thing to be able to do that. So hey Pete from India, while using Cypher, can you please tell a method that the spectator will backtrack the calculations and find that the calculations actually reveal a different number? So it's a great question. It's the exact same when it comes to toxic or anything like that. And it's this is the problem with using multiple spectators for something. When you use multiple spectators for something, especially in the toxic or in the likes of Cypher, is that each person's only remembering one number. And therefore, because each person's only remembering one number, it makes it almost impossible for them to not remember those numbers. So what you've got to do is you've got to mix it up a little bit. So it might be that you say to somebody, right, just name the first 6 numbers that pop in your head. Bam, 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 bam. Okay, now give me another 6 numbers. Bam, 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 and you fire them in. So now there's no way that anybody can remember those first 12 numbers. And now you start your process of adding personal numbers. Give them something to obfuscate the end result so that it's impossible. Whether that's blindly tapping it in, whether you're worried about that, it's telling them to fire numbers out quickly. And that way, because you're using multiple spectators, if they're firing them out quickly and you're pressuring them and you're pushing them, they're never going to be able to remember those numbers. But that's a really great question, because it happens all the time. And it certainly happens in toxic. I actually had something in how to read minds, or maybe how to control minds, where they do recalculate the numbers because they remember them, they write them down, and then the recalculation's different, and then I take credit for hypnotizing them to forget the original number, which is worth a look at. Pigcake, when you next to in a pigcast dog, we miss you. Pigcake's a character, absolute character. Somebody is saying that they made the palm stick. I do the same way and gladly elaborate to you privately how I do. I know that's how they work. You see that their skin just below their eyes are very smooth. Yeah, subconsciously I'd never noticed that, but I will look out for that going forwards. Let's have a little scroll down. Let's have a look at this. Message retracted. Any thoughts on the premise of IA with mentalism? I was pleasantly surprised with Matthew Wright's new Amy, I think it's called. I was pleasantly surprised with that. I don't really I don't really use AI or technology. Listen, I accidentally went live earlier on for about 1 minute and 50 seconds without even knowing that I'd gone live. So me and AI and technology and ChatGPT and other things just don't mix. I'm not very good at it. But one thing I did do is I was talking to a mentalist and a hypnotist in Vegas. I'm not going to say who it was. And they were doing something with AI and using AI to hypnotize people. And I said, I think you've got it the wrong way around. I said, if you know you can hypnotize somebody, wouldn't it be interesting to use suggestion to seemingly hypnotize ChatGPT? You know, I thought there was something interesting in how the language can hypnotize the bot. So again, I reversed it. But yeah, I've done that. Do you think there's a maximum length a progressive anagram should be? And how many misses do you think it's okay to include? And that's Tom Stevenson. So Tom, to answer your question, when it comes to progressive anagrams, I think it's interesting sometimes to look at transgressive anagrams instead of progressive anagrams. And actually, the no answer is better than the yes answer most of the time, which is really weird because as mentalists, we're supposed to seem to succeed. But actually, in the context of an anagram, a no answer is actually better than a yes. And let me give you an example of what I mean. Let's say, for example, that they're thinking of Gemini. And I say, there's an R in there, right? And they go, no. And you say, you're not a Taurus. And they go, no. You go, okay. We're going to have to do this slightly differently. It doesn't seem like they've given you any information there, yet they've given you all the information that they need to give you, which I think is a really interesting thing. And the reason that's interesting is because the no actually gives you an answer, and it takes you straight down to the exact branch that you need to be on to reveal the information. So I try to stick to one no, in my anagram there's one no, but that one no is so that I can burn the anagram and throw it away, and that no then takes me onto the branch that I need to be on to know where it is. And I'm moving so quick because I know the anagram off by heart that because I'm moving that quick, usually the no gets washed away. But it doesn't matter because in that context, I think that any more than two. But transgressive anagrams are interesting because transgressive anagrams are the exact opposite. You're not looking for a yes, you're looking for a no. And the anagrams are designed to be so much quicker because in getting one no or two maximum, they've never said yes, and or they've said yes, but more often than not, you're aiming for a no. So it's the reversal, the transgressive anagram, and that no instantly takes you down to the information, which I think is a better way to go about it. So I'd look up transgressive anagrams, but one really if you can get away with it. Two if you are struggling with somebody, and if it's somebody that's a skeptic that keeps changing their mind, as many as you want. But I am going to share with you a little secret. I'm going to share with you something that I probably shouldn't share, but I think it's fun, and it's about the vault. So if you're using a transgressive anagram, what you can do is you can say to somebody, right, I'm going to teach you how to protect yourself from psychic attacks. I'm going to teach you how to stop somebody reading your mind. Now think about that as a plot. I've reversed it again, and that's what this talks about, is reversing stuff. I'm going to teach you how to stop somebody getting inside your head. Now let's say that my aim's to get no's in the anagram that's going to reveal the piece of information. So, let's say, for example, that I say, there's an R in there. No. You see, you're locking me out. There's an A in there. No. But that tells me what the star sign is, right? Not using that anagram, it's a slightly different anagram. But imagine that you're using transgressive anagrams and you're teaching somebody to stop you from reading them. And you get more excited when they give you a no. So now you're patting them on the back for giving you a no. And when you pat them on the back, they're inadvertently giving you the information. And you say, right. So my process of locking somebody out is I want you to look around the room at the things that you can read and visualize and lock onto. So look around the room, and when you're really honed in and locked in on something, give me a yes. They're locked in and go, yes. I go, is there an R in your sign? No. Is there an A? And again, it's a different anagram, but I won't share the anagram because people have bought the product, but they're looking and I go, is there an A in there? No. And I go, now look at me. And they look up at me. And I go, now you've broke that concentration. This is your star sign. So I use the how to protect yourself from psychic attacks to be able to flip the anagram backwards, get the no answers that I need to get, congratulate them for giving me a no, because the premise is that they're locking me out, and now reveal the information the moment they look back at me and they don't think they've given me any information. And that's why sometimes transgressive is better than progressive. Again, I hope I'm not waffling and talking the glass out of a dead dog, which is something I can do. But Seth Pike, you and Fedden would make for an incredible conversation. We did it recently on the Grail. Fedden and I had an hour-long interview, and I will say for anybody watching this, this is going to be the very, very, very last chance to get hold of the Grail, because Michael Murray just took the the buffer number, which I talked about on the Grail video, and I've got the last few left. I'm on the last few, that's it. And that's not me just saying it to bump up sales, because they're just not going to be there. If you want to get them, you can go over to www.sleightoofmine.co.uk, which is on here, or if you're in a pinch, www.peterturner.co.uk. They're the last few. There's not very many left, so it's your last chance to grab those, and then they're coming off, and then they'll never be out ever again. So let's have a look at this. I've heard you talk in the past about your voice and how you change it to easy understand when speaking to a participant. I'm also from the north of England. Tom, it's true. If you listen to my voice now, it's not very different from my original voice, but it's different enough. So, you know, I do change it. Hey Peter, Alan here. We met at BMC and you talked to us about how to introduce mentalism as young magicians to be taken seriously. Oh, I remember. How's it going? And we were supposed to get back in contact with each other to work out an interview. That advice has literally changed so much for me. You know, it meant lots. Listen, it was great hanging around with you. It was great chatting to you. Of course, I remember who you are. Like, blessings. Let's catch up soon. You're very, very generous, my friend. Let me also give you this little idea to make a small contribution. I've had an idea for the Omni deck for a while now. Instead of playing cards, blank cards with song titles or singers' names written on them. It's just shooting me out. Will be used. And the cards will turn into the album of the singer chosen by the audience, a cassette tape box from the 90s. You see, now that's interesting, right? This is what I'm saying. It's like everybody else is turning it into a meaningless glass block. And what you've done there, if you didn't get what I was saying, is, and this is, again, it's from Can saying to have a list of songs, and then you have that list of songs, and obviously you're going to force whatever song it is that you want that represents the artist. And when you turn it into a glass block, instead of a glass block, it's an old cassette tape with the album cover on it. Genius. That's what I'm talking about. Think a little bit about what it is that you're doing. Sidestep the original. Everybody's doing it this way. Look over that way. That's probably the best presentation from the Omni deck that I've ever heard. And, you know, hats off to you, because I love that. You know, I love that. Somebody asked me how inspired I was by. Someone asked me how inspired I was by Max Maven, and the answer to that question is like infinitely. I met Max back in 2014. We were at a place called the Elders together, and the Elders is this little hidden house in the Hidden Hills in Los Angeles. And Max were a genius. Like Max's Prism series literally changed my life. So I love Max to pieces. I love Max's material. I wanted to include him in the Blackpool footage. That's not a stage show from Blackpool. I want to address a couple of things about that whilst I'm on the subject as well. I had somebody leave a bit of a shitty comment. They were like, well, the first theatre were a 900-seat theatre, and then the next talk you did were 2,000. So how could you say you were giving a talk to over 1,000 people? Because I were initially meant to give one talk 2 times, and 900 plus 200 is 1,100. That's over 1,000 people. So that's what I meant when I said that. I didn't literally mean that there were 1,000 people in that room at that one time. I was giving a talk to over 1,000 people. And over the weekend, I met hundreds of other people. And I can tell you now, more people snuck into that 900-seater room and more people snuck into the 200-seater room. I know, because I got to check the capacities afterwards. But that's that. But I wanted to use the Max Maven footage in that footage just to pay homage to Max. The same, I paid homage to Max, I paid homage to Burglass, and I'll be paying homage to a lot of other giants as well, because, you know, I stand on their shoulders. So guess who in Australia are the multiple male names starting with S, and this creates a problem for me. How can I get around this? Thanks, Pete. It's 6 a.m. here. You're tuning in from 6 a.m. and to reward you for that, I'm going to tell you, find categories that are not names. Places, for example, there's not a lot of places that begin with the letter S. Countries, you know, find different instruments, find star signs, whatever, find different categories. Just do a deep dive into different categories, so you don't have to use the names, but you're still getting information that's going to give you more information if you're not just using it for guess who. I saw the Grail on the Erdenays Magic Store. Is it legit? No, it's not. But the great thing about that, and this is the bit that I love, is the people that are getting it off the Erdenays Magic Store don't understand that those PDFs are tracked, first and foremost. Secondly, I can see who's logged in and I can stop access to those. But the reason I've not is because they're part of a subfolder, and this subfolder don't contain all the links. It don't contain all the same information. Half the links don't work because they've been shut off. So it's not legitimate. Don't ever go to a site like that. I know exactly who's running the site. The only reason I've not mentioned it is because there's something going on behind the scenes that we'll be dealing with at a point soon. We have the address of the person. So that's all I'll say on that matter. But that's that. I don't know if anyone appreciated this as well, but every time I made at least an effort and didn't care what people think about my persona, people were more impressed. That's true, JJ. You know, like, look, I've said this before. I've had people ask me to write about particular subjects. And I always say no, because it's my canvas, they're my brushstrokes, they're my paintbrushes, and all I'm doing here is sharing my perspective on stuff. Take my advice, leave it, say that I'm the worst performer in the world, say that I'm the worst mentalist, say that I'm the best. I'm just sharing my perspective on things, and that's it, and that's all I can do. I don't want to talk about the same stuff as Bob Cassidy. Invariably, I will be at points, but I'll be sharing it from my perspective. I don't want to do things the same way as David Berglass. David Berglass, I love to pieces. You saw my homage to Berglass. That Any Card at Any Number became the thing that it came at the end of the documentary. If you've not seen it, go check it out. You'll see what I mean. Like, I stand on their shoulders, but I don't want to do things their way because I'm not them. I didn't have the same upbringing as them. We don't have the same background. We didn't grow up and weren't influenced by the same people. And if we were influenced by the same people, it's likely because of the prolific amount of work those people put out that we were inspired by different things. So it's not that I don't care about who I am or what I'm portraying. I care more than anybody else cares, but I can only do me, and I can do me better than anybody else on the planet, and you can do you better than anybody else on the planet. And that's why people are impressed, because when you stop caring about delivering what people expect you to deliver and just share your perspective on life, what happens is it feels credible and it feels genuine, and people know you're talking from the heart, and because of that, it wins them over every time. And I can tell you, character and charisma beats method exponentially. Let's have a look at this. Who will you choose between Darren Brown, Bob Cassidy, Max Maven, and Richard Osterlin? So I know Richard quite well. I knew Bob Cassidy quite well. I knew Maven not as well as I knew Bob. I know Richard about as well as I know Bob. And Darren, I met Darren. Again, won't profess to know about his personal life. The interesting thing about Darren is Darren moved things forwards. Like, Darren really moved things forwards in a way that nobody else had. And he was almost what I'd consider the David Blaine of mentalism. I'm a massive fan of Darren Brown. If it wasn't for Darren, then I wouldn't have been inspired to do some of the things that I do. I don't want to ever be a clone of Darren or a clone of Bob Cassidy or a clone of Max Maven. It's not in my interest. I'd like to think that at some point, and I'm not saying now, but I'd like to think at some point that I'm put in the same list as them. Do you know what I mean? And I'm up there at the same, sort of put in the same sentence as them. And that'd be a really nice compliment. But if I were to pick out of all of them, I think I'd pick Darren just because we have a visual representation of what Darren did. And what I mean by that is Darren were lucky enough to have cameras in front of his face. He were lucky enough to have a team. And not only were he lucky enough to have that, he were good at what he did. So I'm not saying that it's luck what he did, but you were lucky enough to have that caveat. I wish that I had a camera that I could go about with and be filmed every day and have a platform like that, because I think with a budget, and people don't understand how important a budget is, but with a budget, and I mean a good budget, I'm not saying Darren had an amazing budget, if what I've been told about his first appearances is to be believed, but if I had a budget to produce a show and I had people following me, I think I could do great things. And that's not to say that I'm even at the same level of any of those gentlemen, because I won't consider it. They're the giants whose shoulders I stand upon. Big Kick put, he was tanked. Just wanted to reach out, mate, and say thank you for so much for showing myself and the lads a great time at BMC. Was the highlight of our trip. So that's O'Brien Magic. It were great. We had such a good night. Like I said, I let my hair down on the Saturday, and that were fun. Yeah, that recalculation is in How to Control Minds. Yeah, Seb. Do you think Colossal Killer is a great opener, and have you ever performed it? So, Quinton, this is a subject that I want to address and I want to talk about, and I think it's worth talking about. And again, I'll get on to a couple more subjects, and then we'll call it a day. Kenton were the first person to ever give me a shot, and I've talked about this on my documentary, the Dice Man documentary. But I remember reaching out to Kenton, and Kenton actually got back to me, and he liked the things that I were doing. And at the time, I were illiterate. So I come from school, and I'm very good when it comes to woodwork, and I'm very good when it comes to engineering and building things. But writing had never been my strong point. Like, reading these comments, it's difficult because some of them are written in shorthand, some of them, and I can barely see them. They're about this big. But you give me a book, I'm pretty good at reading. Like, reading I've done since I were a young kid, and I were far beyond my own level of reading when I were a young child. And then I kept reading, but writing were never something that I were really good at. I didn't really focus on grammar and punctuation, didn't really understand where you were supposed to put commas, didn't really understand the difference between there and there and there. Didn't understand all that, right? And because I didn't understand all that stuff, it made it really difficult for me to capture my vision. And what Kenton did is Kenton captured that for me. So I'd talk to Kenton, I'd write a draft of something, he'd rewrite it, he'd decipher it, which I felt really sorry for him. It actually nearly took us 2 years to get the book out, Devious Realities, because of that. Now, what a lot of people don't realise is that there were actually about 20 other ideas that I sent Kenton, and Kenton said they were horrible. And then years down the line, at the time, I thought there was horrible, but years down the line, I've actually released some of those things because I picked them back up, and people thought they were great, and it taught me something. It taught me that, look, Kenton was the very first person to ever give me a chance, and I owe him a massive amount of respect. I respect him probably more than any other mentalist that's alive today, but I just don't want to do things the way that he does it, same as I don't want to do the things the same way that Richard does it, or Darren. But in regards to Colossal Killer, it's one of those effects that's a great effect, and if you've got it, it's a worker. It's brilliant. But I don't like it. And the reason that I don't like it is not because it's not good, it's because it doesn't suit my character. If you genuinely predicted something, why would you write down that you were going to be off by 1? You've got to sort of look at it like that and understand that it's a bit of a strange thing, that if you truly predicted this, why would you ever be 1 out? And if you're saying for entertainment purposes, what's more entertaining, being 1 out or being bang on? And I think the hit of being bang on is always the best outcome, but being off by 1 slightly just doesn't cut the mustard for me. I actually thought a better line. Off by 1's a bit robotic, so I've talked about this in the past, but I think throwing out a casual line of, oh, this is probably going to be 1 higher, is better. And it's better to put 1 card down and say, this is probably going to be 1 higher, or point out that you're putting a card in your wallet. And then as you're looking at them, pretending them to read them, saying, do you know what, this is probably going to be 1 higher, but I'm not going to go back through the deck and change this. Then when they tell you the number, let's say they say 3, and you say, and you've put in there a 2. You say to them, I did say that yours would be what? And they go, sorry, let's say that you put in there a 2, and they've picked a 3, and you go, I did say that yours would be 1 higher. You said 3. So if mine was 1 lower, it'd be a 2. I did say that before we ever got to that. So now when they take it out, you get the hit of being bang on. And they're the one that's reiterated that. If, for example, you've picked you've put in there a 6 and theirs is a 5, and you said, I said that it was going to be 1 what? And they say 1 higher. Right, so I said mine's going to be 1 higher, which I think is better, and not having to write it on the back and then it comes out. The 1 higher line I think is a more interesting line than off by 1. Not really a fan of being off by 1, but I get it. The method helps you be able to present the performance, but I think there's something cleaner in just going through, taking 1 card, holding it up, and saying, I'm going to transmit this into your head. Now, there's 52 cards. There's a lot of different cards, but don't worry, this is a small number. So just get a small number into your mind and think of the first suit that pops into your head, the first one that just comes into your mind. Now, if you change your mind, go back to the other suit. Hopefully you're thinking of the 3 of hearts. Now, I think there's something interesting in the simplicity and the beauty of 1 card being placed down. Now, I'm not saying that that's the be-all and end-all method, because using a marked deck, you can do what I talked about earlier and reversing it. But I think there's something to be said about the simplicity and the beauty of seeing 1 card on display. It's the Holy Grail, taking 1 card and reading somebody. And put me in a situation where I'm actually working with somebody, and I promise you, and you can believe me or not, it doesn't matter, I can 9 times out of 10, without using a wallet or multiple outs, figure out what card somebody's thinking of by just gauging it. So for me, it doesn't really do it for me, but that's it. And you can see in the comments, people are putting, no way, I was thinking of the 3 of hearts. There we go. It's and that's the way it's. And when people feel that, now Fredo will always have a story to tell of that. Do you see my point? And if you're doing that to a few people at the table to see who's the most intuitive, they'll go away and believe that they picked up on that. But as it goes down, regarding the topic of character development, I can highly recommend your Volume 8 from your monthly series. It's full of pure gold and real wisdom, and even a few of old photos of you as a badass singer. It is in there. So yeah, that's in that's Volume 8. That's on the website. Again, there's some interesting stuff. And do you know what? Interestingly, I've never really said this out loud, but I thought it when I released that series of mentalism, and I'm going to look at that again because I really want to update that. Really, I want to do it again. I want to look at it with fresh eyes and see the difference between then and now. Maybe do the next 13 volumes, so we'll have 26 of them, and then later on in life do the next 13, so we'll have the biggest volumes possible, but I'll go back over those ones. what I thought were really interesting there in the character development thing is it gave me a gauge of what people were interested in. So, like, for example, the playing cards one like flew out. The dual reality one, not so much. The numbers one, not so much. The drawing duplications one flew out. The character development did worse than all of them. And it really opened my eyes, because I've always said, and I always stand by, the plot, the premise, the character matters. The method does not. There's a million of them you can buy from any store. You can't buy your own character. You can't buy your own premises. So, you know, something to be said about that. It's invaluable. But yeah, recommend effects involving mnemonic technique stuff. Look, I'll give you one right now. I'll share this. This is gonna be the last 10 minutes, so I'll share this with you now. And this is for Max. So let's say we take a standard stack, and I like the 8 kings stack or size stebbings, but I prefer the 8 kings. If you don't know the 8 kings, it's really simple. It's 8 kings threaten to save 95 queens from 1/6 jack. That's the mnemonic. 8 king 310 2 7 9 5 queen 4 ace jack. Play that back a few times, but it's a mnemonic. You can find it on Google. But the reason that that's interesting is because everybody does it with playing cards. Everybody takes a deck of playing cards, and then they use those playing cards to set them up in that order, and then they do tricks using that stack. I think that's a waste. So what I did is, years ago, I thought, well, wait a minute. Can I use this stack for other things that I don't have to remember? And the answer is yes. So let's say that I take the club and I call it names, the hearts I call it numbers, the spades I call it places, and the diamonds I call it shopping items. And I take a pad and I write this out in front of me, and I go, okay, 7. Well, that sounds like Stephen, so I don't have to do any thinking there. 4. Well, I pick a name that begins with F. That's 4 letters long. It's Fred. 5 would be Frank. I pick a 3-letter long name. Like, let's say I'm doing 10. So let's say I'm doing 10. I'll do Tim, because it's very close. So I don't have to remember anything there, because the number itself cues me into what it is. Same with numbers. I just write the numbers. Ace is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3, and King's 13. So now I've got a stack of clubs, which are names, a stack of hearts, which are numbers, spades. I pick places that sound exactly like the places. So, for example, the Free City, I know that's the number 3. Nottingham Forest is number 4. Seven Oaks is 7. 5 Points is 5. Toulouse is 2. Niagara Falls is 9. So I don't have to remember any of those. Then I go down to shopping items. Jack Daniels, Jack, King Pot Noodle, #1 album of the week, 6 Flags. And so all I do is convert those numbers to those, and I stack the deck the same: clubs, hearts, spades, diamonds, in chased order. So it'd be name, number, place, shopping item. But now the beauty of this is you've now got a stack of random pieces of information that you can spread out and show everybody and sit back. They don't look like they're in black, red, black, red, black, red, black, red order. They're a series of random bits of information, and all you've got to do is treat it the same. So let's say it were the 3 of clubs. You know the next card's the 10 of hearts, because you're using the 8 kings. So the 3 of clubs is on the face. You know that they've picked up the 10 of hearts. I know that's the number 10. Let's say, for example, that they'd picked up the 7 of spades. Well, I know that's places. I know it's 7 Oaks. Super simple. Super simple. But what you're doing is same as the cassette tape we talked about earlier with the Omni deck, which were left in the comments by Can. You're changing it just very slightly, but it becomes original. It feels original and it feels different. So that's really important. So what's the best starting point to get into mentalism? We are going to talk about that on a video. I mentioned that earlier on. Hey, Greg, that's my cousin Greg's tuned in. It's nice to see you. Let's catch up. It's been a long time. What do you think of naked ESP? Depends which version you're talking about, because there's a series of different versions of this. Now, are we talking about like just going out? Are we talking about the actual physical book Naked ESP? Are we talking about the video download Naked ESP? Are we talking about the Naked Mentalism set by John Thompson? Or are we just talking about going out with nothing and doing extrasensory perception tests naked? Like, could we have some clarity on that, just so that I know which one it is, and then I'll be able to give you the answer as best that I can. Let's have a look at this. Hi Pete, it's Jen. Great seeing you at Blackpool, and I loved your lecture. Will you be doing any lectures in the future? Hi Jen, how are you? I hope you're all right. I hope you got to see Stephen. I don't really do lectures. It's just something that I don't do. I don't do it very much. But like maybe in the future, and I'll keep you updated. Jim, it was lovely to meet you at Blackpool as well. Like I really hope that you're enjoying some of the things that I'm sharing. These sort of lives, they're sort of me stripped back a little bit. They're not me. I'm trying to make them sociable like we would be if we were sat in a bar having a drink or we were sat having a cup of coffee. Instead of it being like prim and proper and I'm having to present everything the way it's supposed to be presented, it's nice to show you when I jump into, performance mode. And it's nice to show you me just being me and me just talking how I talk to you if we're having a general conversation. Do you have a routine that uses pendulums? You don't have to explain the routine, but I wondered if you use them. So I have a really beautiful pendulum that were made for me years ago, and it's a bullet. And it's got a piece of chain and it's got a bird skull at the top. It's not a real bird skull, it's a gold cast bird skull. But yeah, I do I do. So I use it, and I will be talking about that like down the line. Fredo, the best way to practice propolis mentalism. Check out my video on how to never suck at mentalism. It teaches you how to practice without an audience. If you're worried about practicing scripting, you're worried about practicing for people, that's the place to check it out. So we'll take a few more. Let's have a look at this. I asked Reed Ferry on his live the other day about how to practice propolis mentalism without performing it, and he said to use ChatGPT, which I'd never thought of. What answer would you give? So same answer, sorry, I just read that back. Here we go. Hi Peter, greetings from Turkey. I'm a close-up magician as well, so if you could give me an idea about psychic reading, what would it be? So this is a great question. Do you know what's blowing my mind? Like what's absolutely blowing my mind is I've never met so many Turkish magicians. So everybody from Turkey, I'm so blown away that there's a number of you, because I come to Turkey quite frequently. Like I said, my family are Turkish, so when I come over there, I'll 100% be reaching out and let's catch up, let's hang out when we're over there. So it's can I talk about readings? So readings are a very easy thing, and I've talked about this in the past. Is you just got to say what you feel, and you've got to be unashamed without a filter. But I'm not saying to give advice on medicine. I'm not saying to give advice on anything that's, science-based. But just look at somebody and say what you see. So let's, for example, say that there was somebody stood in front of me right now. They look at me, and the first thing, let's say I see a nervous look on the face or a worried look on the face. The very first thing that I might open with is, what's really interesting is I feel right now it's almost, there's a weight on your shoulders that you're not talking about. You've not wanted to get off your chest. You've not been able to talk to anybody else about it, but I want you to know that you can seek comfort in the fact that I can see what this is, and you don't have to share it out loud physically because I'm hearing it. And I want you to know that everything's going to be all right. Now, it might be that worry there. I'm telling them, you don't need to tell me what it is, but if you want to, you can. And you don't need to worry about saying this out loud, but I can tell you that everything is going to be all right. Let's say, for example's sake, that you notice that somebody's really positive and somebody's really overjoyed. What you can say is, you can look at them and say, it's really interesting looking at you because you're giving off such good vibes. You're giving off such good vibes that it's inspiring me to get out of the slump that I've been in recently. And you flip it and you reverse it. Say what you see. Say what comes in your head. If you think that this person's having financial troubles, never point out and go, you're having financial troubles. You say, can I ask you a question? Recently, have you had a worry on your mind that's to do with career or finance? And ask them. And 9 times out of 10, they'll say yes. Whatever you feel, say, ask, respond. And just respond as if, the best way to look at it is if this person is a friend asking you a question, how would you advise your friend? How would you tiptoe around a friend that's wanting advice off you? How would you do that? And if you're going to tiptoe around it, talk to this person the same way, but have a little bit more respect because you don't know this person. And that's the best way to give a psychic reading. Again, I know I'm sort of talking about it, but on the Grail, I do a full section on readings. You get to see me doing readings in the real world and see the response that people get from the readings that I'm giving them. And you'll see just how I operate and what it is that I do when I'm giving a reading. Sprinkle in some Barnum statements if you need to as the bridges, but there's a full section on that set. I've been watching a lot of your videos and learning a lot, and I've been starting with your tutorial videos for the Evoke deck, and it's pretty much a whole course in mentalism. So many key concepts shared. Thank you for that, Jim. When I sat down with the Evoke deck, what people don't realise, Craig had actually sent me an Evoke deck in the post, and it didn't come. So when I got into Blackpool and I sat down with Craig, that was the very first time I'd ever held the Evoke deck in my hand. So every idea that you see on that set is me speaking for the first time about the Evoke deck. So anybody that's taken any sort of value out of that, thank you, because for me, I sat down and didn't know if it were going to stack up to what Craig had had developed or what Craig was sharing, because I'd never seen what Craig were doing other than a quick performance. So when I'm talking about out of this world, and when I'm talking about forcing specific motions, and when I'm talking about other things, it's just me just riffing off the top of my head. And so you get to see what it's like when I'm put under pressure to create via necessity. So I'm glad that you really love the information there. So Namanal, wait a minute, Namanal, sorry about that. Like the writing is so tiny, I don't know how to make it bigger. Let me see if I can make this bigger. Told you I'm a boomer. It says, how are you so good at psychology? What books have you read? The reason that I consider myself all right at psychology is because I'm from the streets. And when I say that, I'm not there going, I'm from the streets trying to be ghetto. It's just that growing up where we grew up, everybody were hustling to survive. So everybody were hustling to make ends meet. You know, I literally lived in an area where, and this is going to sound ridiculous when I say it, but on this council estate, this ghetto, people had literally set up house insurance on their houses and keep receipts, and they'd fake robberies. You know, that sort of thing to feed your kids at Christmas to get extra money, and then you could sell your goods on. I'm not saying that my family did that, but in the area it were a popular thing. Robberies were a popular thing. Muggings were a popular thing. Fights and fighting. If you couldn't fight and you couldn't hold your own, then you were bullied. And I grew up fighting, and I grew up like being, when I say this, a boy. And what I mean by that is that I climbed trees, I hung around with other guys, I had fallouts, and we're into sports for a bit and then not. But seeing people on the breadline, you learnt very quickly those that were telling the truth to try to get, money for their family, and you learnt of those that were trying to get money for drugs and other things. And you learnt when somebody were lying, or you learnt when somebody were never going to give you something back. And you got to see people unfiltered. And the middle class and the upper class are a bit different. What they've done is they've learnt to hide their flaws. So when they represent themselves to you, those filters are in place, and you never really get to see behind the mask. But I think that the best lessons in life are spending time talking to real world people. And that's not to say that the middle class and upper class are not real world people. I'm not saying that. But they have a refined and different and more educated outlook on life, because they have facilities and resources that are available to them that the lower class don't, or the lower class don't naturally have available to them. Because I'm from the lower class, so I had to go out there and find that myself. But it's quicker, and I talk about this, and it's a really interesting paradox, and I call it the homeless paradox. And it's a really, really interesting outlook. It's every time you put £1 into a homeless person's box to help them, you're actually doing more harm than good in the long run of things. That's not to say not to give to the homeless. I'm not expressing that. You should give if you've got, right? But what I mean by that is, in England, there's a benefit system. I'm not going to get into the whole benefit system, but the benefit system requires you to have a place that you live, a place that you can have post posted to. You've got to have identification. You go, you stand up, you queue, and you get given what they call job seekers allowance. I don't know if it's called that anymore, but it used to be called job seekers allowance, but it's like welfare. And you get given a certain amount of money, but to get to that point, let's say, for example, they might give you each day £25. But to get that, you've got to go turn up at this place, you've got to log into a computer, you've got to look for jobs, you've got to prove that you're trying to work. They can stop your benefits whenever they want. They can make you go on to work experience days, and if you can't get there, or you don't have the money to get it there, they cut your benefits. If something happens to you, they stop your money. If there's an error in the system, you don't get your money. So what people find is it's actually easier when they're giving £1 by multiple people over a day. If they earn £30, they're actually earning more money than they'd be earning if they signed up to benefits. So every time you put £1 in that box, you're keeping somebody in that position, because it's easier for them. It's easier for them to make £20-30 in a day just by begging than it is to go to these places because of the system. So it's not the people that are at fault, it's the system, and it's not the people giving. So it's a really interesting paradox, because every single way around you look at it, there's an error or there's a fault, and it's a two-tier problem. And the reason I mention that is, though, that these people will talk to you on a level. They know the streets. They know what it is that's behind people's head. They're very savvy. They might not be educated in ways that most other people are, but they're so educated in the things that they need to be educated in. And I can tell you, go look at the coder on YouTube. He's the very first person to say that he doesn't have a formal education. But there's not a thing that guy don't know about circuit boards and building PlayStations and Xboxes and other things. And he literally used to get these Xboxes, take two of them, put them together, and take them to a pawn shop and pawn them in. Now, this is a guy that struggles to read, he struggles to write, and now he's a very good reader as a result of him building these Xboxes and PlayStations and other things. But go watch him. He's called The Coder on YouTube, and it shows you that these people, they're very educated at what they need to be educated at, and therefore books and other things sometimes don't fit into their world. It's not a necessity for them to get through their life. So the reason that I consider myself pretty good at psychology or summing people up is that then I moved into sales. And when I worked sales, regardless of what anybody says, when you're knocking on people's doors, you learn scripts, which were good for me learning scripts later down the line. You learn about delivering scripts. You learn people's reactions to what you're saying, and it's almost equivocal choreography. Everything that you're doing is taking you off down a different path. It's taking you off down a different route. They give you this answer, you're moving down that. And it got me very good at magician's choice or equivoque very quickly in the real world. And so I take that and I use that in my performances, and I almost treat every performance I'm giving like equivocal choreography. I try to find the route that naturally best goes off down, and I'm prepared for any eventuality. So that's probably a good answer to that. How do you think what are the best things to reveal in the name and place routine? So I'm going to do a full video on the psychology of peaking and the psychology of what you do when you get information, because the way we taught things is not necessarily the best way to do it. My way might not be the best, but from one piece of information I can give you 10 hits, and I can tell you things there's no way I could know, because I've learned the psychology about breaking that piece of information down and even using no's instead of yeses to get what I need. Sometimes a no is a good example. Go back to the Blackpool video I just did with a memory revelation. And I know that the memory is that she's in the kitchen, she's dancing with her granddad. So the very first thing that I say is that I see that there's multiple people in this memory, but you're almost more specifically focusing on one person. That's correct, right? And she says yes, which confirms that there were more there. There might not have been, and it doesn't matter. But then I say, and this is the beautiful bit, I say, okay, you're in a house, but more specifically, you're in a kitchen. Yes. Now I know she's dancing with her granddad. And so what I do there is I go, this is your grandma's kitchen, right? She says, yes. Well, that's the correct answer. It's a grandma and a granddad's kitchen, but I'm getting a yes from it. That question's a bit of fluff, but to her, it makes her feel like I'm learning more about this memory. And anybody watching that from the outside in, it's like, wait a minute, how could he have known that with a grandma's kitchen? How could he have known the specific house, specific room? And I say, then this is the hit that is a beautiful hit. I go, but you're not thinking of your grandma, right? No. So now I've got 4 or 5 hits from the fact that it's the granddad she's focusing on. And I will talk about how I do that and how I break it down and how I see that in a moment to be able to reveal it that quickly. But that's a good example of how I'm breaking a minute piece of information down and making it big to make it seem like I'm delving into a memory. So that's that. If you ever visit Poland, let us know somehow. I'd love to come over there and I'd love to do something over there. So let's talk about it. We're talking about the naked ESP deck with a simple circle and square. Jason, the honesty is that I don't really use it. I know exactly which deck you're talking about. I don't really use it. It's a great little thing. I just think that anything with symbols is almost harder to sell than anything with drawings. So, you know, instead of using a square, using a house might be more prominent. Instead of using a circle, using something that's circle might be more prominent. You know, like find something that's naturally circle, like a pizza or something like that. But drawings, I think, are more interesting. And you can still do ESP stuff. You're just using drawings instead of symbols. But it's worth, you know, if you've got it, like I say, take it and change it very slightly, just like we did with the stack a second ago, and you'll be perfect. Command and the plus sign makes the text bigger. I did not know that. Let's have a look at this. Oh my God, are you kidding? All this time I've been sat here. Watch how fast I can read this stuff now. Maybe a bit too personal. Have you gained some weight recently? Any tips? Because I struggle a little bit with gaining weight regularly. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. See how quickly I can read that now? I can see it, right? JJ, the honest answer is I've just lost 16 pounds in the last couple of weeks. So I'm actually down. My tops are baggy. I'm actually down. But the honest answer is yes. Since the last video, since before Christmas, which a lot of the videos that you've seen, for example, the ones that you've seen in Hollywood and other things were filmed last year and I were less weighty. But the honest answer is yes. And in my character building video, I'm actually going to go into what it is that I eat, what my diet is. And I have an unhealthy obsession with food. So I'm doing the carnivore diet. Usually I do a calorie deficit. I'm doing the carnivore diet with a calorie deficit. And yeah, so at the minute, yeah, I am dieting. I'm going to lose another 13 pounds, which for me doesn't take long. I can literally drop weight like nobody's business. So you'll see me in a month's time and I'll look completely different to how I am now, because my weight fluctuates so fast. But to answer your question, the camera adds £10, so probably losing that £16 were a waste of time. But from Christmas to now, yeah, I have gained weight. The way that I operate normally is November, so any winter month, I hibernate. And what I mean by that is I just eat what I want. Then when it comes to the spring months, I start to work out, I start to get healthy again. And then when I start to get healthy later down the line, I then pack myself up back over winter and then drop it off again. So round about this time period, you'll see a fluctuation going down, and round about spring going up to October, November, you'll see my weight like shrink massively. Let's have a look. People are having an issue purchasing the deck from the site. I don't know. I don't know what. Maybe it's because people have purchased it. I don't know. I'd have to say I don't have any internet on my phone up here. So for which I apologise, but there is. Maybe try again, and if not, send me an email after here at peterturnermind.co.uk. That's it. I nearly put www before it, but peterturnermind.co.uk. And then send me an email, and if there's still quantity left, then we'll work it out. Maybe just PayPal me and I'll send one. Okay, so Can's saying that certain methods, and I'm going to do 5 more minutes, and that's it, and then we'll jump into the rest later on. These methods were explained to people through TV broadcasts and YouTube videos, or explained due to transparent presentations. What are your thoughts on using such exposed methods, or at least our country? So it's like learn to dress them differently. The one ahead normally has 3 phases. Whenever you do a one ahead with 2 phases, that's why it works so well in name place, because people expect a 3-phase routine. And there's an old expression that, and it's true, it's a very true sentiment, that back in the day with thumb tips and handkerchiefs, they had red handkerchiefs in, and they sold them nationwide in America and England, and people knew exactly how the secret worked. And every time a magician pulled out a red handkerchief, it were exposed. They knew how it were done. I swear to you this, they changed the colour of the silk to white, and then people went back to asking how it were possible, because they'd only been able to get hold of the red ones on the market. So when people made white ones, they went, oh, it must be some different method. So that's, a way around it. It's just change the presentation very slightly. And when you change that presentation very slightly, that fixes most problems. But, JJ, when you said it were a bit too personal, there's nothing too personal. This is our channel. If you want to talk about something, it doesn't even have to be mentalism related. We'll talk about it. Look, Danny's asked me, will you be getting the new Metal Gear Solid game remakes? What are they going to be put out on? Because Metal Gear Solid is one of my favourite games of all time. And I love Hideo Kojima's insights into his making of video games, because he made his video games like films. And I was really blown away by the intricate details and the subtle secrets that were hidden in his work. And so I'll 100% be getting him if there is any. I've never played 4 or 5. I don't know if there is a 6. I stopped after number 3 because I was so scared that the series were going to be tainted by the remakes. And I'm not much of a gamer, if I'm 100% honest, but things like that I really love. Like Metal Gear Solid 1, incredible. The Twin Snakes remake were alright. I've got the remake I actually got the remake bought for me on the Switch by my brother. He knew that that's what I'd want, so he got me the remakes. And I actually have 1, 2, and 3 on the Switch, so I've finished them. And again, number 2 were an interesting one, but I loved it. Number 1, 2, and 3, I'd say, are the best video games of all time for me. And I also love the fact that Hideo Kojima is just a boss when it comes to making those games. With great power comes great responsibility. Do you think teaching the powerful techniques of readings could be used for nefarious purposes? I think that any of this stuff can. Like we were talking earlier on about somebody going out, and earlier on, I'm just going to make the text a little bit bigger again. Thank you, Fredo. People could go out and just use this stuff to pick up people, pick up dates. And again, you could be sleazy and you can do that. I'm not saying it is sleazy to do that. I'm saying that if people are using it solely for that and solely for the wrong reasons, then likely, that's being used for nefarious purposes. But I'm not advocating that. If you want to do that, look, I'd do whatever you want. Like if you want to go out and give readings and earn money from that, then do it. This is the thing, and this is something that I don't care to admit. If you are on the breadline and your family's struggling to eat and you've got children and you need to put food on those kids' tables and you have to lie about being a psychic to do that, I'm not going to hold it against you. I might have a difference in opinion on what you're doing. I might not believe what you're doing. You could claim till the cows come home that you're this, that, and the other. You know, you're not going to fool me, but I don't mind, and I don't take away your right to be able to do that. Do whatever you need to do to feed your family. It doesn't bother me. I'm not saying to rob people. You know, I'm not saying to go out and physically hurt people, but again, it's surplus to requirement. If people come along and they want to come along and they want to experience something like that, then, and you're there to provide it, and you're providing food for your family at the same time, then everybody wins. It really doesn't matter whether I like mediums and psychics or not at that point. So, you know. Thoughts on indirect hits. I open by writing a prediction out and ask a spec to talk about a special day. I thumb write the hashtag of that day out of 365. They check Google to confirm, then I do the life equation. It's a brilliant way to present stuff, and I think those little ways, the unexpected ways, are definitely ways to do things. And if you're quick enough to be able to do something like that on the fly, use it. Indirect hits are always amazing because the periphery of what you're revealing is more often than not more interesting than the thing that you're revealing, which sounds ridiculous, but it's true. You know, it's true that the periphery of anything that you could reveal is probably going to be more interesting to them because it feels more magical. And I don't mean magical in the sense of magic and mentalism. I mean more of an experience. Tom Gibbons, are you going to an Oasis gig in the summer? Do you know, Tom, I actually purchased tickets. I purchased tickets when they first came out. I set up this thing. Somebody sat in queue for me. I got tickets, and then Ticketmaster, it shut itself and then refunded a load of people, and I was one of the people that it refunded. So I wish that I could go. Maybe I'll buy a ticket, I don't know. But I love Oasis. Like, Oasis are incredible, and I'd go in a heartbeat if I could get tickets. The Magic Man, hi Pete, what would be the best book or books for cold reading in your opinion? Thank you. There is a lot of different resources on this, but I wouldn't say to get books. What I do is, the first thing I do is go to YouTube, type in George Anderson medium, and go and watch the psychics do it. Who better to do it than the people that are doing it, instead of our second-hand versions of what we think they do? Go and watch them. See what I mean? Go and watch them, and I promise you that that'll open your eyes. Just write down some of the lines that you find are banging hard, and just work those lines into what you're doing. And they're the best resources. Watch them when they get a miss, how they cover it. Write down how they're covering the misses. And all of a sudden you'll start to see patterns. And when you see these patterns, you'll be blown away by it. So this will be the last question. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you everybody for watching. But this will be the last question I answer. And I think this will be a good one. JJ, will there be a reprint of Attic Salt or any other way to get hold of it other than eBay? Now here's an interesting one. And this is something that I was thinking about auctioning, but I don't know if I will, but if you're interested in this, let me know. I have a pre-production version of Attic Salt. There's no version like this. It doesn't have the same cover as the one that actually got printed. It was my version where I actually cut it, stuck in the leaf pages myself, stuck in the gold ribbon myself, and I went, and it's a full version of the book. I mean, I think there's 2 routines in there that were taken out of the printed version, but that version is available. You know, I think the original retailed for like 300 quid. If somebody wants it, you can have it for £500. There's not another one of them on the planet. And you can email me at peterturnermind@hotmail.co.uk. It's a collector's item. There'll never be another one like it. Like I say, it's literally my personal one. The only reason that I'm getting rid of it is because I don't have the space in my office. I'm moving my office. And when I move my office, there'll undoubtedly be a few things that are collector's items like that that'll be found along the way. But that's one of them. Attic Salt, pre-publication ribbon. It's actually the one that I use in the video about Attic Salt that I promoted. You see me holding it in front of Michael Murray and Steve Hairsign, and I've glued all the inserts in myself. But yeah, if you want to get hold of that, email me at peterturnermind@hotmail.co.uk. We could talk about it. It's yours. Let me know. But yeah, right. I shall jump off there. I don't really know what I'm doing, so I'm going to be making this up as I go along. Let's have a look. Let's see if it lets me do this. Do I click on this?